Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Theodore Ashworth, but everyone calls me Ted. I've been a ranger in Daniel Boone National Forest for 12 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these Kentucky mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. It was August 1976, hot and sticky like only a Kentucky summer can be. The Red River Gorge was my beat. Thousands of acres of wilderness where people came to disappear, some for good reasons, some for bad. I knew every trail, every hidden valley, every place a man might set up shop away from prying eyes. I became a ranger to get away from the corruption I'd seen as a state trooper. City police work had gotten ugly, with too many dirty cops and too many payoffs. Out here in the forest, things seemed cleaner. Black and white, right and wrong, legal and illegal. That morning started like any other. Coffee at sunrise, checking my gear, loading up the truck. My wife Sarah had made extra sandwiches. She always worried I wouldn't eat enough when I was out on patrol. My boys, 12-year-old Mike and 10-year-old Danny, were still asleep. They'd be fishing at the creek behind our house by the time I got home, if I was lucky. The radio crackled as I drove the winding forest roads. "Ted, we got a report of smoke near Pine Ridge. Might be another still." I sighed and grabbed the radio. "Copy that. On my way." Moonshiners were a constant problem. These mountains had been making illegal liquor since before my grandfather was born. Most of the time, it was just poor families trying to make ends meet. But sometimes, you'd get the dangerous ones, the ones who'd shoot first and ask questions later. The smoke was easy to find. Black and thick, rising from a hollow about 2 miles off the main trail. I parked my truck and hiked in, following the smell of burned wood and something else. Something sweet and sickening that made my stomach turn. The still was a mess. Upper tubing twisted like broken bones, mason jars scattered and shattered, and in the middle of it all, what was left of a man. I'd seen fire victims before. This was different. The body was burned beyond recognition, but the weird thing was, everything around him was barely touched. The wooden shack that housed the still should have been ash. Instead, just the man was burned, like something had cooked him from the inside out. I radioed for the coroner and started taking pictures. The whole scene felt wrong. 37 years old, and I'd never seen anything like it. The fire pattern didn't make sense. When a still explodes, everything burns. The alcohol, the wood, the grass for 50 feet in every direction. Here, you could have sat down on the ground 3 feet away and not felt the heat. Dr. Henderson arrived 2 hours later, sweating and cursing the hike. He'd been the county coroner for 20 years and had seen his share of still accidents. "What do you think, Doc?" He knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb anything. "Well, he's dead." Henderson had a dry sense of humor that served him well in his job. But after a few minutes, his joking stopped. "Ted, come look at this." The man's hands were reaching towards something or trying to push something away. His mouth was open in a scream. But the strangest thing was his eyes. They weren't burned away like the rest of him. They were wide open, staring at something that wasn't there anymore. "I've seen men die in fires," Henderson said quietly. "They don't look like this. This man was terrified of something before he burned." "Any idea who he is?" Henderson shook his head. "Not from what's left. But I found this." He held up a partially melted wallet. Inside was a driver's license, barely readable. "Jimmy Morrison, lives about 5 miles from here." I knew the Morrison family, poor but honest. Jimmy had 3 kids and a wife who cleaned houses in town. He wasn't the type to run moonshine, but these days, desperate people did desperate things. "Any idea what caused the fire?" "That's the thing," Henderson said, standing up and wiping his hands. "There's no accelerant, no gasoline, no kerosene, nothing that should have burned this hot. It's like he just caught fire." I walked around the site one more time, taking notes. That's when I noticed something else strange. The ground around the still was covered in footprints, Jimmy's work boots, clear as day. But there was another set. Bare feet, with strange burn marks in the dirt where each toe had stepped. "Doc, take a look at these prints." Henderson came over and knelt down. "Well, I'll be damned. Looks like someone was here with him, someone walking barefoot." He pointed to the burn marks. And whatever they stepped in was hot enough to scorch the ground. I took pictures of the prints, but something about them made my skin crawl. They weren't quite right. The toes were too long, and they seemed to have claws instead of nails. "Could be an animal," I said, more to convince myself than Henderson. "What kind of animal walks upright and has toes like that?" I didn't have an answer. We loaded Jimmy Morrison's body into Henderson's van, and I stayed behind to finish documenting the scene. The sun was getting low, and shadows were starting to creep across the hollow. That's when I heard it, a sound like someone crying, but not quite human. It echoed off the mountains, impossible to pinpoint. I called out, thinking maybe someone was hurt. "Hello? Anyone there?" The crying stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own heartbeat. Then, from somewhere in the trees, came a voice, low and rough, like someone who'd been screaming for hours. "Shouldn't have come here, lawman." I drew my sidearm and spun around, but there was no one there. Just trees and shadows and the smell of burned things. "Who's there? Show yourself." But there was only silence. I backed toward my truck, keeping my gun ready, fighting the urge to run. Rangers don't run from shadows and voices. But as I drove home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the darkness between the trees. At dinner, Sarah asked about my day. I told her about the still and the accident, but I didn't mention the voice or the strange footprints. No point in worrying her over nothing. But that night, lying in bed, I kept thinking about Jimmy Morrison's eyes, wide open and terrified, staring at something that had scared him to death before the fire ever touched him. I'd been telling myself for years that all the old stories about these mountains were just superstition. Moonshine runners always blamed their accidents on ghosts and devils, anything to avoid taking responsibility for their own carelessness. Now, I wasn't so sure. The call came in 3 days later. Another fire, another body. This time it was up near Devil's Creek, a name that suddenly didn't seem so quaint. I met Sheriff Bill Crawford at the scene. Bill was my age, a good man who'd been keeping the peace in this county for 8 years. He looked shaken, which wasn't like him. "Bad as the Morrison place?" I asked. "Worse." He led me through the trees to another ruined still. This time we got a witness. The body was in the same condition as Jimmy's, burned beyond recognition but surrounded by barely touched equipment. But this time there was someone sitting on a fallen log 20 feet away. An old mountain man named Pete Sawyer, staring at nothing and shaking like a leaf. Pete was what city folks would call a character. He'd lived alone in these mountains for 40 years, making corn liquor and minding his own business. He knew every trail and every hiding spot, and he'd never caused anyone trouble. "Pete," I said, sitting down next to him. "You okay?" He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "It got Billy," he whispered. "Desham, the devil got Billy Hutchins." Billy Hutchins, another local family man, another guy just trying to feed his kids. "What happened, Pete?" "We was working the still, just like always. Billy was checking the coils when—" Pete stopped, his whole body shaking harder. "When the fire came walking out of the woods." "Fire doesn't walk, Pete. This one did." He grabbed my arm with fingers like iron. "It looked like a man, but it was made of blue flames. And it was angry, Ted. So damn angry." I'd known Pete for years. He wasn't the type to make up stories or see things that weren't there, but what he was describing was impossible. "Tell me exactly what you saw." Pete closed his eyes. "Billy was bent over the coils when the temperature just shot up. Hot as hell, but there wasn't no flame yet. Then I heard this sound like someone screaming way off in the distance. Billy heard it too. He stood up and looked around, real nervous-like. Then what?" Then it came through the trees. Tall as a man, but skinny like it was starving. Blue flames dancing all around it, and where it stepped, the ground caught fire. It had a face, Ted, burned down to the bone, but still a face. And it was looking right at Billy. What did Billy do? He tried to run. Pete's voice broke. But that thing moved faster than any man should. It reached out with hands made of fire and grabbed Billy by the shoulders. He started screaming, and then he just burst into flames from the inside out. I looked over at the body, just like Jimmy Morrison, burned from within while everything around him stayed almost untouched. What happened to the thing? It looked at me, Pete said. Looked right at me with eyes like burning coals. And it said something. What did it say? It said, "Tell the law to stay away from mountain business." Then it just faded back into the trees like smoke. Bill Crawford had been listening to the whole story, with a look that said he thought Pete had lost his mind. I wasn't so sure. 2 identical deaths in 3 days, both at moonshine operations. That wasn't a coincidence. Pete, I need you to come with us. Give a statement. He shook his head violently. I ain't leaving these mountains. That thing knows I'm here, but it let me live to carry the message. I won't push my luck. We couldn't force him, so Bill and I documented the scene and headed back to town. On the drive, Bill finally said what we were both thinking. 2 men dead in 3 days, both burned the same impossible way. Either we got a serial killer with some kind of new weapon, or what? Or Pete's telling the truth and we got something else entirely. That evening I stopped by the library and looked up everything I could find about local folklore. Most of it was nonsense, stories about phantom hitchhikers and haunted bridges. But I found one story that made my blood run cold. In 1923, a moonshiner named Ezra Caldwell had died in a still explosion up near Pine Ridge. According to the newspaper, federal agents had been closing in on his operation when the still blew up, taking Caldwell with it. His body was never found, just pieces scattered across a half-acre of burned forest. But according to the old-timers interviewed after the accident, Caldwell had sworn he'd made a deal with the devil himself. He'd never be caught by the law, and anyone who tried to shut down moonshine operations in his territory would pay the price. The newspaper called it superstition. I was starting to think it might be something else. That night, I drove back to the Morrison site with a camera and some recording equipment. I told myself I was being thorough, documenting everything properly. But the truth was, I needed to know if what Pete saw was real. I parked a quarter-mile away and hiked in by moonlight. The hollow felt different at night, colder, despite the August heat. The trees seemed to lean in closer, and every sound made me jump. The still ruins looked the same, but something felt wrong. The air was thick and hard to breathe, like right before a thunderstorm. I set up my camera and started taking pictures. That's when I noticed the temperature dropping. Not gradually, all at once, like someone had opened a freezer door. My breath started to fog and frost began forming on the metal remains of the still. Then I saw the light. Blue flames dancing in the air where there was nothing to burn. No fuel, no source, just fire floating 3 feet off the ground. It moved like it was alive, twisting and reaching toward me. I grabbed my radio, but it was dead. The camera, too. Every piece of electronic equipment I'd brought was completely dead, like the batteries had been drained in seconds. The flames started to take shape. First just a rough outline, then more detailed. A man, tall and thin, made entirely of blue fire. I could see through him, but he was definitely there. And he was looking right at me. I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't move. The thing glided closer, and I could feel the heat rolling off it in waves. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through a graveyard. "You don't listen too good, lawman." I found my voice. "What do you want?" "I want you to leave my mountains alone. Stop poking around where you don't belong. People are dying. People who break the law are dying. People who make deals with revenue agents and federal men. That's justice." The thing moved closer, and I could see its face clearly now. Skull-like, with burned flesh hanging in strips, but somehow still alive. Still angry. "You're Ezra Caldwell." It smiled, and the expression was horrible. "Smart man. Yes, I'm Caldwell. Been watching over these mountains for 53 years, making sure the old ways don't die out." "The old ways? You mean moonshining?" "I mean freedom. Freedom from government taxes and regulations. Freedom from outside laws telling mountain folk how to live." The flames around it grew brighter. But some people forget that freedom has a price. Some people think they can make deals with federal agents. Some lead them to family stills, betray their own people for money. I thought about Jimmy Morrison and Billy Hutchins. Both had families struggling with money. Both might have been desperate enough to make a deal with federal agents. "So you killed them?" "I gave them justice. Mountain justice. The same justice I'll give to anyone who brings outside law into my territory." The thing started to fade, but its voice remained clear. "Go home, Ranger Ashworth. Kiss your wife and boys good night. And forget you ever saw me. Because if I see you here again, if I see any more law in these mountains, you won't like what happens next." The flames disappeared, and the temperature shot back up to normal. My equipment started working again, but when I checked the camera, all the pictures I'd taken of the flames were blank. I hiked back to my truck on shaking legs. Whatever I'd just seen, whatever I'd just talked to, it knew my name. It knew about my family. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a bottle of whiskey, trying to make sense of what I'd experienced. Sarah found me there at dawn. "Bad night?" she asked. "Yeah, real bad." She sat down across from me. "Want to talk about it?" I looked at her. My wife of 15 years, the mother of my children, the most important person in my world. How could I tell her I'd spent the night talking to a dead moonshiner made of fire? Just work stuff, nothing to worry about. But as I said it, I wondered if that was true. Ezra Caldwell had mentioned my boys by name. He knew where I lived, and somehow I had the feeling this was just the beginning. The third death came a week later, but this one was different. This one was federal. ATF agent Dave Martinez had been working undercover, trying to infiltrate the local moonshine network. He was found at dawn by a hiker, burned to death in a clearing that showed no signs of fire damage anywhere else. Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez arrived from Louisville that afternoon with a team of federal investigators. She was all business. Short, tough, with the kind of confidence that came from years of handling explosives and dangerous criminals. "Ranger Ashworth? I'm Rodriguez, ATF. We need to talk." We met at the county sheriff's office. Rodriguez spread out crime scene photos on the conference table. Pictures from all three sites. 3 men, 3 identical deaths, all connected to illegal distilling operations. "Your turn to tell me what you know." I told her about the still sites, the impossible burn patterns, the lack of accelerants. I didn't mention Ezra Caldwell or blue flames made of supernatural fire. Not yet. "Any witnesses?" "One. Pete Sawyer. But his story is unusual. I'd like to talk to him. Good luck. He won't come down from the mountains, and he's pretty spooked." Rodriguez studied the photos. "These burn patterns don't make sense. It's like the victims were incinerated from the inside while everything around them stayed cool. I've never seen anything like it." "What do you think caused it?" "Some kind of accelerant we haven't identified yet. Maybe military grade, something experimental. Could be we're dealing with someone who has access to unusual chemical weapons." It was a rational explanation. I wanted to believe it, but I'd seen Caldwell with my own eyes, talked to him face to face. This wasn't about chemical weapons. "I'd like to partner with you on this," Rodriguez said. "Federal jurisdiction, but we could use local knowledge. You know these mountains better than anyone." I agreed, partly because I didn't have a choice, partly because I figured 2 people might have a better chance of surviving what was coming. We started by installing surveillance equipment at known still sites. Motion sensors, cameras, temperature monitors, everything the federal budget could buy. If someone was using these locations to hunt moonshiners, we'd catch them. The first night was quiet. The second night, we got readings. "Ted, look at this." Rodriguez was monitoring the equipment from a command post in town. Site 7 is showing massive temperature spikes, 90 degrees to 160 in seconds, then back down to normal. Any movement? That's the weird part. The motion sensors aren't picking up anything human-sized, but the temperature readings suggest something big and hot is moving around. We drove out to Site 7, an abandoned still about 3 miles up Devil's Creek. The equipment was still running, showing normal readings now, but when we checked the cameras, we found something impossible. The footage showed blue flames moving through the clearing like a living thing. They formed rough human shapes, danced around the old still equipment, then faded away. But here was the strange part. The flames cast no light. Everything else in the clearing stayed dark, like the fire was absorbing light instead of producing it. "Equipment malfunction," Rodriguez said, but her voice wasn't confident. "All of it? At the same time?" She didn't have an answer for that. The next morning, we found Pete Sawyer's body. He was sitting against a tree near his cabin, burned the same way as the others. But this time, there was a message burned into the bark above his head. "Last warning." Rodriguez stared at the words, her federal training warring with the evidence in front of her. Someone's playing games with us, trying to scare us off with ghost stories and special effects. "Pete wasn't involved in any moonshine operations," I said. "He was just a witness." "Exactly. Someone wanted to silence him before he could identify them. But I knew the truth. Caldwell had killed Pete because he'd talked to the law, and the message wasn't for some unknown criminal. It was for me." That evening, Rodriguez insisted we stake out the Morrison site. If our guy is working the same area, he might come back. See, heck on his handiwork. We set up in the trees with night vision equipment and radios. Rodriguez was convinced we were dealing with a flesh-and-blood killer using psychological warfare and exotic weapons. I was hoping she was right. At midnight, the temperature dropped 30 degrees in 10 seconds. "Jesus," Rodriguez whispered, checking her thermometer. "How is that possible?" The blue flames appeared in the middle of the clearing, swirling and dancing around the ruined still. But this time, they didn't fade away. They grew brighter and started to take human shape. Rodriguez was filming everything with a night vision camera. "I'm getting this. Whatever kind of special effects this is, we're getting it on tape." Caldwell's form solidified, becoming more detailed and terrifying. He looked directly at our hiding spot, smiled that horrible burned smile, and started walking toward us. "Rodriguez, we need to leave. Now." "No way. This is our chance to—" Caldwell raised one flaming hand, and Rodriguez's camera exploded in a shower of sparks. The night vision equipment died. Our radios went silent. "What the hell?" Rodriguez drew her sidearm, but I grabbed her arm. "Bullets won't stop that thing. We run or we die." But Caldwell was faster than any living man. He cut off our retreat, forcing us back toward the clearing. His voice echoed through the trees like wind through a cave. "Agent Rodriguez, you're a long way from Louisville." Rodriguez fired 3 shots center mass. The bullets passed right through Caldwell without slowing him down. "Not possible," she whispered. "Federal agent," Caldwell said, his flames growing brighter. "Just like the ones who killed me in 1923. I've been waiting 53 years to return the favor." He reached for Rodriguez with hands made of fire, but I tackled her sideways, rolling us both behind a fallen log. Caldwell's touch set the log blazing, but it bought us a few seconds. "The creek!" I shouted. "Water might stop him." We ran for Devil's Creek, crashing through undergrowth with Caldwell's laughter echoing behind us. I could feel the heat from his flames getting closer, singing the hair on the back of my neck. We reached the creek and plunged in. The water was only 3 feet deep, but it was moving fast and cold as ice. Caldwell appeared on the bank, his flames hissing and steaming at the water's edge. "Water won't save you forever, lawman, and it won't save your family when I come calling." Then he was gone, fading back into the forest like smoke. Rodriguez and I climbed out of the creek, soaked and shivering. She was staring at me with eyes that had seen too much. That wasn't special effects. No, it wasn't. What was it? I told her everything. About Ezra Caldwell's death in 1923, about his deal with the devil, about mountain justice and supernatural revenge. She listened without interrupting, her federal agent training trying to process information that didn't fit in any manual. So, we're dealing with a ghost that can kill, a ghost that knows where I live and has threatened my family. Rodriguez was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "How do we stop it?" "I don't know, but we better figure it out fast, because that was his last warning, and I don't think he's the kind to bluff." As we walked back to our vehicles, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Fresh footprints in the mud by the creek, bare feet with claw marks where the toes should be, and they were heading in the direction of my house. I broke every speed limit getting home that night. Rodriguez followed in her federal vehicle, both of us pushing our engines as hard as they'd go on the winding mountain roads. The house looked normal from the outside. Porch light on, Sarah's car in the driveway, warm yellow glow from the living room windows. But something felt wrong the moment I stepped out of the truck. The air was too still. No crickets, no night birds, no sound at all except our footsteps on the gravel. "Sarah?" I called out, unlocking the front door. "Boys?" No answer. Rodriguez had her gun drawn, following standard procedure for a potential hostage situation. But I knew this was different. This wasn't about procedure or training. This was about something that had been dead for 53 years and held grudges longer than any living man. We found them in the living room. Sarah, Mike, and Danny sitting on the couch like they were watching TV. But the television was off, and their eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. "Sarah?" I touched her shoulder. Her skin was ice cold, but she was breathing. They were all breathing, but none of them responded to voice or touch. "Some kind of drug?" Rodriguez suggested. "No." I knew better. "Caldwell's got them, some kind of supernatural hold." That's when we heard the laughter coming from the kitchen, low and ugly like broken glass grinding together. Caldwell was sitting at my kitchen table, his flames dim but visible in the darkness. He looked almost human in the low light, except for the burned flesh and the eyes like red coals. "Nice family you got here, Ashworth. Real nice. Pretty wife, good-looking boys. Be a shame if something happened to them." I drew my sidearm, knowing it was useless but needing to do something. "Let them go. This is between you and me." "Is it? You brought federal law into my mountains. You ignored my warnings. You forced my hand." He stood up, his flames growing brighter. "Now you get to choose. Walk away from this investigation, take your family, and leave these mountains forever, or watch them burn like Jimmy Morrison." "I can't do that. More people will die. Only the ones who break the old laws. Only the ones who betray their own kind to outside authority. That's justice, mountain style." Rodriguez stepped forward. "There is no justice in murder. You're just a terrorist using supernatural powers." Caldwell turned his attention to her, and his expression grew even more terrible. "Federal agent, you people killed me once. Came into my mountains with your badges and your warrants, destroyed everything I built. But death didn't stop me. It just made me stronger. You died in a still explosion. An accident." "Accident?" Caldwell's laughter shook the windows. "Your predecessors shot up my still while I was working, sparked an explosion that should have killed everyone in a half-mile radius. But I made a deal, Agent. Traded my soul for the power to protect these mountains from outside law forever." He moved toward Rodriguez, flames trailing behind him. "And now I'm going to finish what your people started 53 years ago." That's when I remembered something from my research. Something about Caldwell's death that might be important. "Your body was never found," I said. Caldwell stopped advancing on Rodriguez. "What?" "After the explosion, the newspapers said pieces of you were scattered across the forest, but they never found your actual remains, never buried you proper. So maybe that's why you're still here. Maybe you can't rest until your bones are put in consecrated ground." Caldwell's flames flickered, and for a moment he looked uncertain. My bones burned with everything else. Did they? Or are they still out there, somewhere in the woods where you died? Rodriguez caught on. If we could find his remains, give them a proper burial, you think that would stop me? But Caldwell's voice had lost some of its confidence. You think some preacher's words and a pine box would end what I've become? Only one way to find out. Caldwell's flames roared higher, filling the kitchen with hellish light. You'll never find them. And even if you did, I won't let you. I'll kill your family first, then hunt you both through these mountains until you're nothing but ash and bone. He raised his hands, and I could feel the heat building. My family was going to die unless I did something desperate. I grabbed the bottle of moonshine. Pete Sawyer had given me weeks ago, clear corn liquor that was probably 90 proof. I threw it at Caldwell's feet, and the glass shattered, splashing alcohol across the kitchen floor. Rodriguez, get my family out of here! Caldwell's flames ignited the alcohol instantly, but instead of burning him, the fire seemed to feed his power. He grew taller, brighter, more solid. Alcohol just makes me stronger, lawman. This is my element. But the burning moonshine had another effect. It lit up the kitchen bright as day, and in that light, I could see through Caldwell's flames to what lay underneath. Bones. Human bones, held together by supernatural fire, but definitely real. His skull, his rib cage, the long bones of his arms and legs. Caldwell wasn't just a spirit. He was an animated skeleton wrapped in ghostly flames. Rodriguez, his bones are still here. He's carrying them with him. Rodriguez was helping my family toward the door, but they were moving like sleepwalkers, slow and unsteady. She looked back and saw what I saw, Caldwell's skeleton visible through the flames. How do we separate them? Water. I remembered how he'd stopped at the creek. He can't cross running water. Caldwell realized what we were planning. His flames exploded outward, setting the kitchen curtains and cabinets on fire. You'll burn with this house before you reach any creek. The whole back of the house was going up in flames, but it was regular fire now, not supernatural. Rodriguez got my family outside while I grabbed the garden hose. Caldwell came after me, moving faster than any living man. His flaming hands reached for my throat, but I turned the hose on him at full pressure. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Where the water hit him, his flames went out and his bones became visible. Old, yellowed human bones held together by nothing but supernatural will. He screamed a sound like metal tearing and stumbled backward. Hurts, doesn't it? I kept the water aimed at his chest, washing away more flames. Water's the one thing you can't burn. Rodriguez appeared beside me with a second hose. Together, we drove Caldwell back, washing away his protective fire bit by bit. His bones clattered and rattled, trying to hold together without the supernatural flames binding them. This won't stop me, he screamed. I'll just come back stronger. Maybe, but first we're going to scatter your bones across 3 counties and bury the pieces in church graveyards. Let's see you come back from that. Caldwell made one last desperate lunge, but the water had weakened him too much. His bones came apart, clattering to the ground like old sticks. The skull rolled to a stop at my feet, its empty sockets still glowing with faint red light. This isn't over. The voice came from the skull, weak but still defiant. I'll find a way. Rodriguez found a metal toolbox in my garage, and we carefully collected every bone we could find. The skull went in last, still muttering threats in a voice like wind through broken glass. By dawn, we'd buried the bones in 7 different church cemeteries across 3 counties, with each piece blessed by a different minister. It took all day, and most of our remaining sanity, but by sunset, Ezra Caldwell was finally, truly dead. My family recovered slowly. Sarah remembered the cold, the sense of being frozen in place, unable to move or speak. The boys had nightmares for months, but they were alive, and that was what mattered. The official report blamed the deaths on a serial killer using exotic incendiary devices. The ATF classified the supernatural evidence, and buried it in files no one would ever see. Rodriguez transferred to a desk job in Washington. She said she'd had enough of field work for one lifetime. My house was a total loss, but insurance covered most of the damage. We moved to a new place 15 miles away, closer to town, farther from the deep woods where old things still wandered. I stayed on, and as a ranger, but I changed my patrol area. No more remote wilderness assignments. No more chasing moonshiners into hidden hollows. I stuck to the main trails and the tourist areas, places where the past stayed buried and the only dangers were natural ones. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind was right, I'd hear things in the forest. Voices speaking in old-time mountain dialect, the sound of copper tubing being bent and fitted, the splash of mash fermenting in hidden barrels. The old ways didn't die with Ezra Caldwell. They just got more careful. Rodriguez calls me sometimes, usually late at night when she can't sleep. She's investigated other cases now, things the federal government doesn't like to talk about. Haunted battlefields where Civil War soldiers still march. Desert highways where phantom hitchhikers cause fatal accidents. Government facilities where failed experiments refuse to stay dead. It's like Caldwell opened a door, she told me during one call. Once you see past the official explanations, you start noticing things that don't fit, things that shouldn't be possible. Any regrets? I asked. About stopping Caldwell? No. He was a killer, supernatural or not. People were dying. She paused. But sometimes I wonder if we really stopped him, or just delayed him. I wondered the same thing. The bones were buried in consecrated ground, blessed by 7 different ministers from 7 different churches. But Ezra Caldwell had made his original deal with something darker than any earthly power. Deals like that don't always honor paperwork and property lines. 3 months after we buried Caldwell's bones, I got a report of strange fires in the next county over. Moonshine operations burning with blue flames that gave off no light. Bodies found charred beyond recognition, while everything around them stayed untouched. I forwarded the report to Rodriguez and requested a transfer to another district. Some fights are worth having. Others are better left to someone younger and braver. My boys are grown now, with families of their own. Mike's a teacher in Lexington, Danny's an engineer in Louisville. Neither of them ever came back to the mountains to live, and I can't. My name is Sam Fitzpatrick, and I've been a ranger at Grandfather Mountain for 21 years. In all that time, I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Broken bones, heart attacks, kids who wandered off trails. You name it, I've pulled someone out of it. That's what made me good at my job. I never believed in the stories. The old-timers around here love to tell tales about the grandfather witch. Some old woman who lives up in the high places, they say. She punishes folks who don't respect the mountain. Pure nonsense, if you ask me. Every time someone went missing or got turned around, there was always a real reason. Poor planning, bad weather, too much confidence, not enough skill. I was drinking my morning coffee when the call came in, October 15th, 1987. The leaves were just starting to turn, and the air had that sharp bite that meant winter was coming. Sam, we got a problem. It was Deputy Martinez from the county sheriff's office. His voice sounded tight. What kind of problem? Missing hikers. Group of 6. They've been gone 3 days now. I set down my coffee. 3 days was bad. Real bad. What do we know? They were experienced. All of them. Had GPS, proper gear, filed a plan with the visitor center. But Sam, he paused. The GPS is showing their location as impossible. What do you mean, impossible? I mean their signals are coming from places that don't exist. 1 minute they're at the bottom of a valley, the next they're on 3 different peaks at the same time. Either their equipment is busted, or what? I don't know, Sam. That's why I'm calling you. I grabbed my gear and headed out. 21 years of rescues had taught me that panic kills more people than exposure ever could. Stay calm, stick to the plan, and you'll find them. I'd brought back over 200 lost hikers. This would be number 201 through 206. The helicopter ride over the search area made my stomach drop, but not from the flying. I could see their gear scattered across the mountainside like someone had thrown it from the sky. Backpacks, sleeping bags, even boots spread out over terrain that would take hours to cross on foot. And the weird part? Some of it was hanging from tree branches 30 feet up. How the hell does a sleeping bag end up in the top of a pine tree? Asked Jake, the pilot. I didn't have an answer for that. We sat down at the visitor center, and that's when the day got really strange. The weather had been perfect for 3 days straight. Clear skies, mild temperatures, light breeze, perfect hiking weather. But as soon as I stepped out of that helicopter, I felt the air change. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. Dark clouds rolled in from nowhere. "Storm coming," Jake said, checking his instruments. "Gonna have to scrub the air search." I looked up at the sky. Those weren't normal storm clouds. They moved wrong, like they had purpose, and they were only over Grandfather Mountain. 3 miles in any direction, the sky was clear as glass. Mrs. Henderson was waiting for me at the ranger station. She was about 70, had lived at the base of the mountain her whole life. Her family went back 5 generations in these parts. "You're looking for those city folks," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. You seen anything unusual the past few days?" She gave me a look that made my skin crawl. "Unusual? Son, you've been up on this mountain long enough to know when she's stirred up." "She? The granny, the old mother of the mountain. Those folks did something to make her mad." I started to give her my usual speech about logical explanations and proper search techniques, but something in her eyes stopped me. Fear. Real fear. "Mrs. Henderson, what exactly? Are you trying to tell me?" "I'm telling you to be careful up there, Sam Fitzpatrick. The mountain remembers everyone who sets foot on her, and she don't forget disrespect." The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. But it was the sound underneath the wind that made me pause. Almost like voices, whispering. "That's just the wind in the trees," I said, more to myself than to her. Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "You keep telling yourself that, son. But when you find those hikers, if you find them, you ask them what they saw up there. You ask them about the old woman who offered to help." She left me standing there, looking out at a mountain I thought I knew better than my own backyard. The storm clouds were getting thicker and the temperature kept dropping. My radio crackled with reports from other search teams. Equipment failures, compasses spinning, GPS units showing locations that didn't match the terrain. I'd been searching these mountains for over 2 decades. I knew every trail, every ridge, every hidden valley. But looking up at Grandfather Mountain that afternoon, I felt something I'd never felt before. I felt like the mountain was looking back at me. The first victim we found was Sarah Chen. She was sitting by a stream that shouldn't have existed, staring at the water like she'd never seen anything so interesting in her life. I found her about 2 miles up the Rough Fork Trail, but that was impossible. According to her GPS tracker, she'd never left the parking lot. According to mine, I was standing in a place that my topographical maps said was solid rock. "Sarah?" I called out. "Sarah Chen?" She turned to look at me, and I had to fight not to step back. Her eyes were different, older, like she'd seen things that aged her from the inside. "The grandmother is testing us," she said in a voice that didn't sound quite right. "She wants to know if we deserve to leave." "Sarah, I'm Ranger Fitzpatrick. We've been looking for you. Are you hurt?" She stood up slowly, and I could see she'd lost weight. A lot of weight. Her hiking clothes hung, loose on her frame, and her hair had gone completely gray. 3 days ago, according to her driver's license, Sarah Chen had been 28 years old. The woman standing in front of me looked 50. "She showed us the old paths," Sarah said. "The paths that were here before the trails, before the roads, before people forgot how to ask permission. Sarah, where are the others? Where's your group? Her face crumpled like a child's. We didn't ask permission. We just took. Broke branches for firewood from living trees. Threw trash in the sacred stream. Michael carved his initials in the elder oak. I looked around for this oak tree she mentioned. There were pines, some scrub brush, a few mountain laurels. No oak trees. What elder oak, Sarah? She pointed behind me. I turned around and felt my knees nearly give out. There was a massive oak tree where nothing had been standing 2 minutes before. It had to be centuries old, with a trunk so wide 6 people couldn't have wrapped their arms around it. And carved deep in the bark, fresh and bleeding sap, were the initials MR plus JL. That tree wasn't there before, I whispered. She makes you see what you need to see, Sarah said. She makes you understand what you've done wrong. I keyed my radio with shaking hands. Base, this is Sam. I found Sarah Chen. I need a medical team up on Rough Fork Trail about 2 miles up. And I looked at the tree again. It was still there. And I need someone to verify my location. The radio crackled with static. Then Martina's voice came through, fuzzy and distant. Sam, we're showing you in the parking lot. You haven't moved from the parking lot. That's impossible. I'm 2 miles up the trail. Sam, we can see you on the security cameras. You're standing next to your truck. I looked at Sarah. She was smiling now, but it wasn't a happy smile. She doesn't let you lie, even till you learn, she said. The grandmother wants to teach us all a lesson. I grabbed Sarah's arm, intending to walk her down the mountain to the medical team. But when I took a step toward where the trail should have been, I found myself walking deeper into the woods. The trees got thicker, the air got colder, and behind me I could hear Sarah laughing. You can't leave, Ranger Sam, not yet. She wants to meet you. We walked for what felt like hours. My watch said we'd been walking for 10 minutes. The trail beneath my feet felt real enough, but it didn't match any trail I'd ever seen. The markers were wrong. The turns went the wrong direction. And the trees were watching us. I know how that sounds. But when you've spent 21 years in the woods, you learn to notice things. Trees don't usually lean in toward the path like they're trying to listen. Branches don't usually reach out to brush against your shoulders as you pass. And the wind doesn't usually sound like whispers in a language you almost understand. She's old, Sarah said, still walking beside me like we were out for a pleasant stroll. Older than the Cherokee. Older than the mountains themselves, maybe. She remembers when the trees were her children and the streams were her blood. Sarah, you need medical attention. You've been out here 3 days without proper food or shelter. You're experiencing hallucinations? She stopped walking and turned to face me. Is that what you think this is? Before I could answer, I heard voices up ahead, human voices, calling for help. We came into a clearing I'd never seen before, though I could have sworn we were still on Grandfather Mountain. 3 people were huddled around a fire that gave off no smoke. As we got closer, I recognized them from the photos the sheriff had shown me. Michael Rodriguez, Jennifer Liu, and David Park. 3 more of the missing hikers. But like Sarah, they'd aged. Gray hair, lined faces, hollow eyes. Michael looked up as we approached, and I saw that his hands were bleeding. She made me carve the char, he said, over and over. She said I had to understand what I'd done. Michael, I'm Ranger Fitzpatrick. We're here to get you home. He shook his head. There is no home. There's only this place now. This place where she teaches lessons to people like us. Jennifer Liu was sitting by the fire, weaving something out of pine needles. Her fingers moved in patterns that made my eyes hurt to follow. She taught me the old ways, Jennifer said without looking up. The ways to ask the forest for what you need. The ways to say thank you. The ways to pay back what you've taken. Where are the other 2? I asked. Your group had 6 people. David Park started to cry. Tom and Lisa, they wouldn't listen. They kept trying to leave. They kept saying it was all crazy, that we just needed to follow the compass down the mountain. What happened to them? She got tired of teaching them, Sarah said quietly. So she decided to keep them. That's when I heard it. Footsteps on the trail behind us. Slow, deliberate footsteps. And humming. Someone was humming an old tune I almost recognized. The 4 hikers all looked toward the sound with expressions I never want to see on human faces again. Terror and love mixed together in equal measure. "She's coming," whispered Michael. "The grandmother is coming to meet you, Ranger Sam." The woman who walked into our clearing looked like somebody's sweet grandma. Gray hair in a neat bun, wearing a simple brown dress that might have been fashionable 50 years ago. She carried a walking stick and a small basket filled with herbs. But her eyes were wrong. Her eyes were the color of deep forest shadows, and when she looked at you, you felt like she was seeing every mistake you'd ever made, every cruel word you'd ever spoken, every time you'd taken something without asking. "Well now," she said, and her voice was like wind through old trees. "Looks like we have a new student." The missing hikers all stood up when she entered the clearing. Not like they wanted to, but like they had to, like their bodies weren't quite their own anymore. "Ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm Ranger Sam Fitzpatrick. I'm here to help these people get home." She smiled, and I saw that her teeth were the color of tree bark. "Home?" she said. "But this is their home now, Samuel. This is where they're learning to be better people. They need medical attention. They've been missing for 3 days." "3 days?" The old woman laughed, and the sound made the trees around us creak and sway. "Child, they've been with me for 3 months. Haven't you, dears?" I looked at my watch. October 15th, 1987, same date I'd started the search. But the hikers were nodding like what she said made perfect sense. "Time moves different up here," Sarah said, "when you're learning important lessons." The old woman walked closer to me, and with each step she took, the clearing seemed to grow larger. The trees got taller, the shadows got deeper, and I started to understand that this wasn't just an old woman who lived in the woods. "You've been taking care of my mountain for a long time, Samuel," she said. 21 years, isn't it? Pulling foolish people out of trouble they made for themselves. It's my job." "Yes, but you never asked yourself why they get into trouble, did you? You never wondered why some people can walk these paths for 100 years without harm, while others get lost within sight of the parking lot." She was right next to me now, and I could smell earth and pine needles and something else, something old and wild and dangerous. "The mountain chooses," she said softly. "The mountain decides who belongs and who needs to learn respect. These children," she gestured to the hikers, "they came here like they owned the place, like the trees and streams existed for their entertainment. They're just people on vacation. They didn't mean any harm." Her eyes flashed, and for just a second, I saw her true full face. Bark for skin, leaves for hair, and eyes like deep holes in an ancient tree trunk. "Didn't mean harm." Her voice rose and the wind picked up around us. "Michael carved his name in a tree that was old when Columbus landed. Jennifer dumped soap from washing dishes directly into a stream where animals drink. David built his fire with wood from a tree that was still alive. They didn't know." "Exactly," she shouted, and lightning flashed overhead. "They didn't know because they didn't ask. They didn't learn. They took what they wanted and never thought about what it cost." The 4 hikers were swaying now like trees in a strong wind. Their eyes had gone completely empty. "So I'm teaching them," the old woman continued. "Teaching them to ask permission, teaching them to say thank you, teaching them that the forest is alive and it remembers everything." I looked at Michael's bleeding hands. "What are you doing to them?" "Making them understand. Michael carves that tree every day, feeling the pain he caused. Jennifer cleans the stream with her bare hands, understanding how her actions spread harm. David tends a fire that never gives warmth, learning that some things shouldn't be taken. And Sarah? Sarah watches the water flow and thinks about all the times she walked past streams without seeing their beauty. All the times she looked at nature like it was a postcard instead of a living thing." The old woman walked over to Sarah and stroked her gray hair like she was petting a beloved cat. "They're learning so much," she said proudly. "In just a few more years, they'll be ready to go home. Changed people. Better people." "Years?" The word came out as a croak. Time moves differently here, Samuel. I thought I mentioned that. She turned back to me. The question is, what about you? You've spent 2 decades on my mountain. Do you deserve to leave? The clearing began to spin around me. Or maybe I was spinning. The trees seemed to lean in closer, and I could hear them whispering my name. I respect the mountain, I said. I've always respected it. Have you? She tilted her head like a curious bird. Tell me, Samuel, in 21 years of rescues, how many times did you stop to ask the mountain's permission before trampling through the forest with your helicopters and search teams? I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it. She was right. I'd never thought of it that way. How many trees have your rescues damaged? How many animals have you frightened with your radios and sirens? How many sacred places have you walked through without even noticing they were sacred? With each question, I felt the ground beneath my feet become less solid. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. I was saving lives, I whispered. Yes, she said, and her voice became gentle again. You were. And that matters, Samuel. It matters very much. But saving lives and respecting the mountain don't have to be separate things. She walked back to me, and this time when she moved, the forest moved with her. Branches swayed to follow her passage. Flowers turned to watch her walk by. Even the rocks seemed to shift slightly to make her path smoother. I'm going to give you a choice, Samuel Fitzpatrick, she said. You can leave now. Walk back down the mountain and forget you ever met me. Go back to your rescues and your radio calls and your helicopters. Nothing will change. And the others? They stay until they learn, however long that takes. What's the other choice? Her smile was sad and terrible and beautiful all at once. You stay. You learn. You become the bridge between my world and yours. You help me teach people to respect what they're walking through. And in exchange, I let your friends go home. I looked at the 4 hikers. Sarah was still staring at the stream. Michael was still bleeding from his hands. They looked like they'd been there forever, like they belonged there now. How do I know you'll keep your word? You don't, she said simply. But you know what happens if you leave them here. I'll stay, I said. But I want to see them walk away first. I want to know they're really free. The old woman nodded. Fair enough. But first, you need to prove you understand what it means to respect my mountain. 3 tests, Samuel. Pass them all, and your friends go free. The clearing dissolved around us like morning mist, and suddenly I was standing on a trail I didn't recognize. The trees were bigger here, older. Some of them had trunks so massive I couldn't see around them, and the quiet was so deep it felt like the world was holding its breath. First test, the old woman said, appearing beside me without a sound. Listen. At first I didn't hear anything. Then slowly I began to pick up sounds. Water running over rocks, wind moving through leaves, bird calls in the distance, and underneath it all, something that might have been heartbeats. What am I listening for? Someone in pain. I closed my eyes and focused. There, a soft, whimpering sound, coming from somewhere off the trail. I followed it through a tangle of mountain laurel until I found a small bear cub with its leg caught in an old steel trap. The trap wasn't one of ours. This was something old, something that had been forgotten in the woods for years. The cub's leg was badly injured, and it was weak from struggling. Help him, the old woman said, but you can only use what the mountain provides. No tools from your world, no radio to call for backup. I looked around. I had my hands in whatever I could find in the forest. The cub was watching me with eyes full of pain and terror. It's okay, little one, I said softly. I'm going to get you out of there. I'd done some wilderness first aid training over the years, but nothing like this. I used fallen branches as levers to pry the trap open. I found moss to pack the wound and stop the bleeding. I gathered specific leaves and berries I remembered from Cherokee friends, plants that could help with pain and healing. But the hardest part was something I'd never really thought about before. I had to ask the forest for help, out loud. I had to thank the trees for their branches, Thank the moss for its healing properties. Thank even the trap for finally letting go. It felt foolish at first. Then it felt right. When I finally freed the cub, it looked at me for a long moment before limping away into the woods. And I swear I heard the old woman whisper, "Well done." The forest around me shifted again, and I was standing on a narrow ridge path. Fog had rolled in so thick I could barely see my own feet. "Second test," the old woman said. "Trust." "Trust what?" "Trust the mountain to guide you. No compass, no GPS, no map. Find your way to the sacred grove using only what the mountain tells you." I started walking, trying to remember everything I'd learned about natural navigation. The way moss grows on trees, the direction water flows, the angle of the sun through the clouds. But this was different. The fog was too thick to see landmarks. My compass spun wildly, pointing in all directions. And every time I thought I was getting somewhere, the path would split or curve in ways that didn't make sense. After what felt like hours of walking in circles, I stopped and really listened. Not just to sounds, but to feelings. The pull of gravity, the movement of air, the sense that some directions felt right while others felt wrong. I started following my instincts instead of my training. When the path felt welcoming, I took it. When something felt off, I went another way. And slowly, the fog began to thin. The sacred grove, when I found it, took my breath away. It was a perfect circle of ancient trees, with a clear spring in the center. The water was so pure, I could see every pebble on the bottom, and something about the place made me want to whisper. "Good," said the old woman, stepping out from behind one of the trees. "You're beginning to understand. The mountain speaks to those who know how to listen." But her expression grew serious as the grove faded around us. "The third test will be the hardest, Samuel. Are you ready?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I meant it. The world went dark. When light returned, I was standing in two places at once. In one, I could see my daughter Amanda with her college friends, hiking up a trail I recognized as Rough Fork. They were laughing and taking pictures, completely unaware of any danger. But I could see what they couldn't. The old woman waiting for them around the next bend, and the look in her eyes that meant someone was about to be taught a very hard lesson. In the other, I could see the four missing hikers. They were huddled together in what looked like a cave, but their eyes were getting duller, like something essential was slowly leaving them. "Choose," said the old woman. "Save your daughter and her friends, and the lost hikers fade away completely. Or save the hikers and watch your daughter learn the same lessons they've been learning. This isn't fair. Life rarely is. But this is the choice that everyone who enters my domain eventually faces. Do you save the people you love, or do you save the people you're responsible for?" I looked back and forth between the two scenes. Amanda was everything to me. After her mother died, she'd been my whole world. The idea of her trapped in this place, aging years in days, learning brutal lessons about respect. But I'd spent 21 years pulling people out of trouble. The hikers had been foolish, disrespectful maybe, but they didn't deserve to disappear forever. "There has to be another way," I said. "There's always another way, but it requires sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" The old woman smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely kind. "You become my partner instead of my student. You help me teach people to respect the mountain before they get in trouble, instead of rescuing them after. You give up your old life to become something new." I thought about it. Really thought about it. 21 years of the same cycle. People came to the mountain unprepared, did things they shouldn't do, and I pulled them out when things went wrong. Maybe it was time to try preventing the problems instead of just fixing them. If I agree, everyone goes free? The hikers and Amanda? Everyone goes free. But you stay. You become the bridge between their world and mine. I closed my eyes and saw my daughter's face. Then I opened them and looked at the old woman. I accept. The world exploded into light and sound and sensation, then slowly settled into something that felt almost normal. I was standing in the parking lot at Grandfather Mountain, and Deputy Martinez was running toward me with 4 people walking behind him. Sarah, Michael, Jennifer, and David looked like themselves again, young, healthy, confused. They had no memory of their time with the grandmother, just vague recollections of getting lost and being found by a friendly old woman who helped them find their way home. "Sam," Martinez called out. "There you are. We've been looking for you for hours. Where did you find them?" I looked at my watch. It was still October 15th, 1987, still the same day I'd started the search. But I felt like I'd lived a year in those few hours. "They were up on Rough Fork," I said, "just disoriented." The hikers were loaded into ambulances for precautionary checkups, but they were fine. Physically, anyway. As they drove away, I caught Sarah's eye through the window. For just a second, I saw a flicker of recognition, a tiny nod of thanks. Over the next few weeks, things started changing. I found myself talking differently to visitors about the mountain. Instead of just giving them safety lectures about proper equipment and staying on marked trails, I started telling them about the forest itself, how old the trees were, which streams were important to local wildlife, why certain areas should be treated with extra respect. People listened. I don't know if it was something in my voice or just the way I explained things, but they listened. The number of rescue calls started dropping. Visitors began following leave-no-trace principles without being told. Kids stopped carving their initials in trees. And sometimes, when I was alone on the mountain, I would see her, the old woman. She would nod approvingly when a hiker stopped to thank a tree for shade, or when someone carefully moved a salamander off the trail instead of stepping over it. I developed what I came to think of as a sixth sense. I could feel when someone was about to do something disrespectful. A subtle wrongness in the air, a whisper that wasn't quite wind. When that happened, I would somehow find myself nearby, ready with a gentle word or an educational moment that would redirect them. My daughter Amanda still came to visit, but she approached the mountain differently now. She would ask my permission before picking flowers for her hair. She would thank the stream before filling her water bottle. She never knew why she did these things, they just felt right to her. "Dad," she said during one visit, "this place feels different lately, more alive somehow." "Maybe you're just learning to really see it," I told her. The old woman and I never spoke directly again, but I felt her presence constantly. She was in the way the trees seemed to bend their branches to shelter tired hikers. She was in the springs that always ran clean and cold. She was in the morning mist that made everything look magical and ancient and deserving of respect. I stayed on as a ranger for another 15 years, retiring in 2002, but I never really left the mountain. I bought a small cabin at the base and became one of those old-timers who tells stories to anyone who'll listen. Stories about the importance of asking permission before taking anything from the forest. Stories about thanking the mountain for safe passage. Stories about an old woman who lives in the high places and watches over everyone, who visits her domain. Most people think they're just colorful local folklore, but every now and then I'll see someone really listening. Someone who understands that the stories aren't just stories. Those are the people who hike the mountain safely. Those are the people who come back changed for the better. Those are the people who learn to see the forest as a living thing deserving of respect, not just a pretty backdrop for their vacation photos. And sometimes on very quiet nights when the moon is dark and the wind is still, I can hear her humming old songs in the trees. Songs that remind me that some lessons are worth a lifetime of teaching. The mountain remembers everything, and now, so do I. My name is Michael Sullivan, but everyone calls me Mike. I've been a forest ranger for 13 years now, working the Coal Creek area in Jefferson National Forest, Virginia. People think being a ranger is all about fighting fires and giving directions to lost hikers. But most of my job is watching the water. Coal Creek runs through some of the prettiest country you'll ever see. Clear mountain water flowing over smooth rocks, feeding into streams that eventually reach the James River. I test that water twice a week, checking for pollution from old mining operations. It's important work. One bad spill can kill fish for miles. That's why when I saw Coal Creek running black as coffee that November morning in 1973, my stomach dropped like a stone. I was doing my regular water check when I smelled it first. a sharp metallic smell that made my nose burn. Then I saw the creek. The water looked like someone had dumped buckets of black paint upstream. Dead fish floated belly up as far as I could see. "What the hell?" I said out loud, kneeling by the bank. The water was warm when it should have been cold. Steam rose from the surface in thin wisps. I'd grown up around mines. My daddy was a miner, his daddy before him. Lost my brother Danny in a cave-in back in '65. I knew what mine runoff looked like. And this wasn't normal runoff. This was something else. I followed the creek upstream for 3 miles, watching the black water get thicker and more toxic. The smell got worse too, like rotten eggs mixed with burning metal. My eyes watered. My throat felt raw. Then I found where it was coming from. The old Brennan Mine. Sealed up tight since 1902 after an explosion killed 47 men. The concrete seal over the entrance was cracked wide open, and black water poured out like blood from a wound. I'd been past this mine 100 times in 13 years. That seal had always been old and solid as a rock. Now it looked like something had busted it open from the inside. I got on my radio. "Base, this is Sullivan at Coal Creek. We got a major pollution event. Requesting immediate hazmat response." "Copy that, Mike. What's the source?" I stared at the broken seal, at the black water flowing out. "The Brennan Mine. Something broke it open." "That's impossible, Mike. That mine's been sealed for 70 years. "Yeah, well, tell that to the seal." While I waited for the hazmat team, I walked around the mine entrance. The concrete chunks were scattered everywhere, some pieces as big as truck tires. But here's what made my skin crawl. The breaks in the concrete were smooth, like they'd been cut with tools. And all the pieces were on the outside of the entrance. Whatever broke that seal had done it from inside the mine. I set up my equipment to test the water and gas levels. The readings I got didn't make sense. Temperature was 97 degrees, warmer than my body. The gas detector kept beeping and showing readings for chemicals that shouldn't exist. Methane levels that would kill a man in minutes. But I wasn't dead. I was standing right there, breathing just fine. That's when I heard the sound. Faint at first, like wind through trees. But as I listened closer, it sounded like voices. Men singing, old mining songs. I knew those songs from my childhood. My daddy used to sing them after work, sitting on the porch with a beer. Songs about going down in the dark, about missing home, about men who never came back up. But there were no men down in that mine. There hadn't been for 71 years. I packed up my gear fast and got out of there. But driving home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from those dark woods. Every time I checked my rearview mirror, I thought I saw lights moving between the trees, flickering lights, like lanterns. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a beer and the old mine records I'd pulled from the county office. My wife Sarah was putting our twin boys to bed upstairs, 7 years old, both of them. The same age I was when my daddy first took me to see a mine. The Brennan Mine records made for grim reading. 47 men dead in an explosion on November 15, 1902. The company said it was an accident, gas buildup that caught fire. But there were complaints filed before the explosion. Safety violations, bad air, dangerous conditions. The mine foreman was a man named Jacob Brennan, same name as the mine. Irish immigrant, worked his way up from the bottom. The report said he died trying to get his men out. Families sued the mining company after, said the company knew it was dangerous and sent men down anyway. But the company had good lawyers. The families got nothing. I looked at the date on the report, November 15, 1902, exactly 71 years ago. Tomorrow would be November 16th. I should have stayed away from that mine, should have let the hazmat team handle it and written my report from a safe distance. But something drew me back the next morning like a moth to flame. The hazmat crew had come and gone. They'd found the same impossible readings I had, gas levels that should have killed everyone in the area, water temperatures that made no scientific sense. They'd sealed the mine entrance with steel plates and warning signs, but I could hear them before I even got out of my truck. Voices, dozens of them, coming from underground, not singing this time, talking, planning, the sound of men getting ready for work. I walked up to the new steel barrier. It was already bent outward in places, metal twisted like something with incredible strength was pushing from inside. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone in there?" The voices stopped. Then from deep in the mine, a voice answered. Irish accent, thick as molasses. "The work ain't finished, Ranger man." My blood turned to ice water. I knew that voice somehow, even though I'd never heard it before. "Who it? Ryu?" I shouted. "Name's Brennan, Jacob Brennan. These are my boys." I knew I should run. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in my truck and drive away as fast as I could. Instead, I found myself asking, "What work?" "The mine's been closed for 70 years. A different voice answered, younger, with a Virginia drawl. "The company never paid what they owed. Never said they were sorry. Never made it right." More voices joined in. Different accents, Irish, German, local mountain folk, all of them angry, all of them demanding justice. "We can't rest," Brennan's voice boomed from the darkness. "Not till accounts are settled." The steel barrier groaned and buckled. One of the plates fell away with a crash that echoed through the forest. Black water began flowing out again. I stumbled backward, but I couldn't look away from the mine entrance. The darkness inside seemed to move, to shift and writhe like something alive. Then I saw the first one. A figure stepped out of the black water, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing old-fashioned mining clothes covered in coal dust. He carried a brass lantern that glowed with sickly yellow light. His face was pale as bone, his eyes dark holes in his skull. Behind him came another, then another. Men walking out of solid rock like it was air. All of them carrying lanterns, all of them covered in the black dust of the mine. I counted them as they emerged, 47 in total, the same number that died in 1902. The tall one, Brennan, looked right at me with those empty eye sockets. When he spoke, I could see his breath in the warm November air. "You got the look of a mining family, boy. What's your name?" I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, but somehow I managed to whisper, "Sullivan, Mike Sullivan." The ghost smiled, showing teeth black as coal. "Sullivan, Irish name, good mining stock." He tilted his head. "You lost someone in the mines, didn't you? I can smell the grief on you." "My brother," I heard myself say. "Danny, cave-in 5 years back." "Aye, the mines take what they take. But your brother died honest. Died with pay in his pocket and a pension for his family. We died for nothing. Company took our lives and gave our families empty pockets." The other ghosts spread out around me in a circle. Their lanterns cast dancing shadows on the trees. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. My breath came out in white puffs. "What do you want?" I asked. "Justice," Brennan said simply. "The Consolidated Mining Company owes us wages, owes our families compensation, owes the world an apology for what they done." "That company's been gone for decades," I said. One of the younger ghosts laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "No, Ranger man. They changed their name a few times, but they're still here, still cutting corners, still putting profit over lives, still poisoning your pretty creek." Brennan nodded toward the forest. "There's a strip mine operation 5 miles north. Same company, new name. They're using the old Brennan tunnels to dump waste. Illegal as hell, but who's going to stop them?" I knew the operation he meant. Appalachian Resources, Inc., and I'd gotten complaints about them, but every time I investigated, their permits seemed to check out. Their lawyers were slick, their paperwork perfect. "You want me to shut them down?" I asked. "We want what's owed," Brennan said. 71 years of unpaid wages, compensation for our families, and an admission that they killed us with their greed." The circle of ghosts tightened around me. The lantern light flickered and danced. I could smell the mine on them, coal dust and gas and the sweet, sick smell of death. "If we don't get justice," Brennan continued, "we'll take it. Every man who profits from our deaths, every executive who covers up the truth, every politician who looks the other way, They'll join us in the dark. One of the ghosts reached out and touched my shoulder. His hand passed right through my jacket, but I felt and anyway, cold that burned like fire, sadness that hit me like a punch to the gut. Suddenly, I wasn't Mike Sullivan, the ranger, anymore. I was someone else. A young Irish immigrant named Patrick, working in the Brennan mine in 1902. I could feel the weight of the pickaxe in my hands, the dust filling my lungs, the fear in my belly as I smelled gas leaking from the walls. I could feel the explosion coming, the terrible moment when spark met gas and the mountain tried to swallow us whole. Then the ghost let go and I was myself again, shaking, gasping, tears running down my face. "Now you know," Brennan said softly. "Now you understand what we went through, what they put us through." The ghosts began to fade back into the darkness of the mine, but Brennan lingered. "You got a choice, Ranger man. Help us get justice, or watch us take it. Either way, the work gets finished." Then they were gone, and I was alone by the broken mine seal with only the sound of poisoned water flowing into Coal Creek. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 47 faces, felt that ghost's hand on my shoulder, remembered what it was like to die in the dark, crushed by tons of rock and company greed. Sarah found me at the kitchen table the next morning, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by mining company records and environmental reports. "Mike, honey, you look terrible. What's wrong?" I wanted to tell her, wanted to share the impossible weight of what I'd seen. But how do you explain ghosts to someone who's never lost a family member to the mines? How do you make them understand that the dead sometimes have unfinished business? "Just work stuff," I said. "Water pollution case. It's complicated." She kissed the top of my head. "Well, don't work yourself to death over it. The creek will still be there tomorrow." But would it? And more importantly, would I? Drove to the office and pulled every file I had on Appalachian Resources, Inc. On the surface, they looked clean. All permits in order, all safety inspections passed, all environmental, reports filed on time. But I'd learned to read between the lines after 13 years of dealing with mining companies. The inspection dates were always the same, predictable patterns that would give the company plenty of time to clean up before the inspectors arrived. The safety violations were minor things that wouldn't shut down operations. And the environmental reports showed pollution levels just barely within legal limits. Too clean, too convenient, too perfect. I made some phone calls. A buddy of mine at the state environmental office, another friend who worked mine safety. Slowly, a different picture emerged. Appalachian Resources had a history. 3 serious accidents in the past 2 years, all covered up or explained away. Workers who complained about safety conditions found themselves laid off or transferred. Local doctors had noticed an increase in black lung disease, but the company's medical reports showed nothing. And the company's ownership traced back through a maze of shell corporations to something called Consolidated Holdings, the modern descendant of the Consolidated Mining Company that had owned the Brennan mine in 1902. Same company, new name, same old tricks. I was still researching when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Sullivan." "Mr. Sullivan, this is Richard Hayes, legal counsel for Appalachian Resources. I understand you've been asking questions about our operations." Ice formed in my stomach. It's my job to monitor environmental conditions in this area. Of course, we appreciate the important work you rangers do. However, we have some concerns about misinformation being spread regarding our safety record. We'd like to invite you to tour our facilities, see our operation firsthand, clear up any misunderstandings. It sounded like a reasonable offer. It felt like a threat. "I'll cider it," I said. "Excellent. How about this afternoon? Say, 2 o'clock? I looked at the clock. It was already noon. "That's short notice. We're very eager to address any concerns. We'll send a car." He hung up before I could refuse. The car that came for me was a black sedan with tinted windows. The driver didn't talk during the 40-minute ride to the strip mine operation. He just stared straight ahead while country music played softly on the radio. The mine itself was like a wound in the earth. Acres of barren ground where a mountain used to be. Huge trucks moved back and forth, carrying loads of coal and dumping waste into enormous pits. The air tasted of dust and diesel fuel. Richard Hayes met me at the gate. Expensive suit, perfect smile, handshake like a politician. "Mr. Sullivan, thank you for coming. I think you'll find our operation is very different from what you might expect." He gave me the full tour, showed me their equipment, their safety procedures, their environmental controls. Everything looked impressive. Everything followed regulations. Everything was exactly what it was supposed to be, except for the smell. Under the diesel and dust, I caught whiffs of something else. Something familiar. The same metallic, rotten egg smell I'd detected at Coal Creek. The smell of poisoned water. "Where do you dispose of your chemical waste?" I asked. Hayes's smile never wavered. "We have a state-of-the-art treatment facility. All waste is processed according to EPA guidelines before disposal." "Can I see it?" "I'm afraid that area is off-limits for safety reasons. Trade secrets, you understand. Company policy." We were walking past a row of buildings when I heard it. Faint, but unmistakable. The sound of men singing, mining songs in Irish accents. Hayes kept talking about safety records and environmental compliance, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was following that sound, trying to figure out where it was coming from. Then I saw him. Jacob Brennan stood between two storage buildings, clear as day in the afternoon sunlight. He wasn't glowing anymore, didn't look like a ghost at all. Just a tall man in old-fashioned mining clothes, watching me with dark, serious eyes. He pointed toward a cluster of buildings at the edge of the complex. Then he held up 4 fingers, then 7, 47. "Mr. Sullivan?" Hayes was staring at me with concern. "Are you feeling all right? You look pale." I looked back toward the buildings, but Brennan was gone. "I'm fine, just the altitude. Perhaps we should head back. I think you've seen enough for today." On the drive back to town, I couldn't stop thinking about what Brennan had shown me. Those buildings at the edge of the complex, what were they hiding? That night, I made a decision. I was going back to that mine, but not as an invited guest. I was going as a ranger doing his job. I just hoped I'd live long enough to finish it. I went back at midnight with a flashlight, a camera, and a prayer. The security guard at the gate was asleep in his booth. I parked a quarter-mile away and walked in through a hole in the fence that looked like someone had cut it with industrial equipment. The mine felt different in the dark. Bigger, more dangerous. The machinery sat silent and hulking like sleeping monsters. My footsteps echoed off the equipment and buildings. I made my way toward the cluster of buildings Brennan had pointed to. They were unmarked, windowless concrete structures that looked more like bunkers than storage facilities. The air around them smelled thick and wrong. The first building was locked, but the second one had a door standing slightly open. I could hear water running inside, and that awful smell was stronger here. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The beam of my flashlight revealed a nightmare. The building was hollow, filled with massive pipes that disappeared into the floor. Black water flowed through clear sections of pipe, carrying God knows what. Chemicals into the ground below. The sound was like a waterfall in hell. I followed the pipes with my light and found where they led. A tunnel entrance roughly carved into the concrete floor. Old mining equipment lay scattered around the opening. Pickaxes, shovels, brass lanterns from another century. This was it. The connection between the strip mine and the old Brennan tunnels. They were using the abandoned mine as an illegal waste dump, pouring toxic chemicals directly into the groundwater that fed Coal Creek. I started taking pictures, documenting everything I could see. The pipes, the tunnel entrance, the old mining equipment. Evidence that would shut them down and send people to prison. That's when the lights went out. Not just my flashlight, though that died too. All the lights in the complex. The whole place went dark as a grave, and suddenly I could hear voices coming from the tunnel. 47 voices, singing in harmony. Deep in the earth, where the coal seams run, men go down when the day is done. Some come back when the whistle blows. Some stay down where nobody knows. The voices got louder as they got closer. I fumbled for my backup flashlight, but my hands were shaking so hard I dropped it. The sound of it hitting the concrete echoed like a gunshot. Then I saw the lights coming up from the tunnel. Not electric lights. The warm, flickering glow of brass lanterns. Dozens of them, rising like fireflies from the depths. Jacob Brennan emerged first, followed by his 46 men. But they looked different now. Not like the solid figures I'd seen before. These were ghosts in every sense of the word, pale, translucent, their clothes and skin bearing the wounds of their death. Crushed limbs, burned flesh, faces twisted with pain. They surrounded me in the dark building, their lanterns casting wild shadows on the walls. "You came back," Brennan said. His voice echoed strangely like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. "Good. The work's almost finished." "What work?" I whispered. "Settling accounts." He gestured to his men, and they spread out through the building. Some began dismantling the pipes with their bare hands, metal shrieking and tearing like paper. Others gathered around the chemical tanks, and wherever they touched, the metal began to corrode and leak. "You're going to poison the whole area," I said. Brennan shook his head. "We're stopping the poison. 71 years of it flowing into your creek, into the groundwater, into the wells where children drink." The building shuddered as his men continued their work. Pipes burst, spilling their toxic contents across the floor. But instead of spreading, the chemicals seemed to evaporate wherever the ghost's lantern light touched them. "The company men are coming," Brennan said, looking toward the door. 3 of them, armed and angry. "They'll try to kill you, make it look like an accident." I could hear vehicles outside now, doors slamming, voices shouting orders. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Brennan smiled, and for a moment he looked less like a ghost and more like the man he'd been in life. "Because you're one of ours, Sullivan. Mining family. You understand what it means to lose someone to company greed." The building door burst open, and 3 men in security uniforms rushed in with guns drawn. But when they saw the ghosts, when they felt the supernatural cold, their courage failed them. "What the hell?" one of them screamed. The ghosts turned their attention to the living men. 47 angry spirits who'd waited 71 years for justice moved as one. The security guards' guns jammed. Their flashlights died. They found themselves surrounded by the pale, wounded dead, and the bravest men in the world would have broken under that pressure. 2 of them ran. The third, older, meaner-looking, tried to grab me. "You're coming with us, Ranger. Mr. Hayes wants to have a word." That's when I felt another presence behind me. Not one of Brennan's men. Someone else. Someone I recognized, even though I hadn't seen him in 8 years. "Leave my brother alone." Danny Sullivan stepped out of the shadows, wearing the same mining clothes he'd died in. The cave-in had crushed his chest and left side, but his eyes were clear and angry. "Danny?" I whispered. "Hey, little brother. Told you I'd always watch out for you." The security guard took one look at Danny and ran for his life. Danny put his hand on my shoulder. Solid and warm, not cold like the others. "You did good, Mike. Dad would be proud." "Are you? Dead? Yeah, but that don't mean I can't help family." He looked at Brennan and nodded. "We got work to finish. The company's going to pay for what they done. All of it." The building continued to shake as the ghosts completed their sabotage. Pipes collapsed, tanks ruptured, the illegal waste system destroyed beyond repair. But more than that, somehow, impossibly, the pollution itself seemed to be dissolving in their presence. "Time to go," Brennan said. "This place won't be safe much longer." As we headed for the door, Danny walked beside me. "Take care of Sarah and the boys. And Mike, don't let guilt eat you alive. I made my own choices." Then he was gone, faded back into whatever realm the dead inhabit. But his words stayed with me as I stumbled out of the collapsing building and ran for my truck. Behind me, the entire complex began to shake apart as 47 vengeful spirits finished their work. The explosion started just as I reached my truck. Not fire explosions, something else. The sound of a century of compressed anger finally finding release. The ground shook, buildings collapsed, and I swear I could hear 47 voices shouting in triumph. I drove straight to the state police barracks and told them everything. Well, almost everything. I left out the parts about ghosts and focused on the illegal dumping, the contaminated water, the cover-up that had been going on for decades. It took 6 months, but the investigation proved everything I'd suspected and more. Appalachian Resources, Inc. had been using the old Brennan mine tunnels as an illegal waste dump for 20 years. The contamination had spread through the groundwater system, affecting wells and streams for miles around. The company had falsified environmental reports, bribed inspectors, and covered up health problems in 3 counties. When the lawyers started digging into the company's history, they found the connection to the original Consolidated Mining Company. Same corporate structure, same pattern of putting profits ahead of people, same willingness to let workers and communities pay the price for their greed. The executives went to prison. The company was shut down, and its assets seized. The families of the original 47 miners, those still living, finally received compensation for their losses, plus 71 years of interest. Most importantly, Coal Creek ran clean again. But the story doesn't end there. I stayed on as a ranger for another 10 years after that, watching over the Coal Creek watershed like a guardian angel. The mine entrance was sealed properly this time, with a memorial plaque naming all 47 men who died there. On quiet nights, when the moon is dark and the forest is still, sometimes I hear them singing down in the tunnels. Not angry songs anymore. Peaceful songs. Songs of men finally at rest. My boys are grown now, both of them studying environmental science in college. Neither one wants to work in the mines, and I'm grateful for that. Some family traditions are better left buried. Sarah asks me sometimes why I stay so close to Coal Creek, why I never took that promotion to Richmond or the federal job in Washington. I tell her it's because someone needs to watch the water, make sure the poison never comes back. But the truth is simpler than that. The dead taught me that some debts can't be ignored, some injustices can't be forgotten. They showed me that protecting the living sometimes means listening to those who've passed on. Every November 15th, I visit the memorial at the old Brennan mine. I bring 47 white flowers and lay them by the plaque. And every year, as I turn to leave, I see him standing by the tree line. Jacob Brennan, no longer pale or wounded, no longer carrying a lantern, just a man in clean mining clothes, watching over his boys and the mountain they gave their lives for. He nods to me, I nod back, and we both go about our business of protecting the places and people we love. Some work never really ends, but that's okay. Some work is worth doing forever. The creek runs clean, the dead rest easy, and justice, though it took 71 years, was finally served. That's all any of us can ask for in this life, or the next. My name is John Mackenzie, and I've been a park ranger at Mammoth Cave for 18 years. I know every twist and turn in those dark tunnels. I know where the air gets thin and where the rocks get loose. I know the sounds the cave makes when it settles, and I know how voices echo off the walls. What I didn't know was that some things live down there that shouldn't exist. It started on a Tuesday morning in April 1989. The radio crackled to life while I was drinking coffee in the ranger station. "John, we need you at the visitor center. We have a problem." I grabbed my gear and drove over. Tom Bradley, the head of park operations, met me at the door. His face was white as chalk. "We've lost a tour group," he said. 12 people, including the guide. They went down into the historic tour route at 9 this morning. Should have been back by 11. It's now past noon. I checked my watch. He was right. The historic tour was our most popular route. A simple walk through well-lit passages that even kids could handle. You'd have to try really hard to get lost down there. "Did you check with Sarah?" I asked. Sarah Jenkins was the guide who'd taken the group down. "That's the problem," Tom said. "Sarah's missing too. All of them, gone." We called down into the cave using our emergency phone system. No answer. We checked the backup routes and the restricted areas. Nothing. 12 tourists and one experienced guide had vanished in the most mapped cave system in America. I suited up with my rescue gear, helmet, lights, ropes, first aid kit. The cave stayed at 54 degrees year-round, so I put on my heavy jacket. I'd done hundreds of rescues over the years. People got scared, took wrong turns, sometimes panicked in the dark. But they always left traces, dropped items, footprints, something. "I'm going down," I told Tom. "Get the emergency team ready, but let me check the OBE. Via spots first." The cave entrance yawned open like a hungry mouth. I'd been through it thousands of times, but something felt different today. The air seemed heavier. My footsteps echoed wrong, like they were bouncing off walls that weren't there. I followed the historic tour route exactly. Every turn, every chamber, every spot where Sarah would have stopped to give her speech about the cave's history. The pathway was concrete, with handrails and electric lights every few feet. You couldn't get lost if you tried, but they were gone. All of them. I reached the turnaround point where tours normally head back to the surface. The chamber was empty, but I noticed something odd. My emergency radio was picking up weak signals, the kind the missing group's emergency beacons would send. The problem was the signals were coming from below me, way below, in parts of the cave that didn't exist. I'd mapped this section myself. There were no lower chambers here, no unexplored passages, no way for 12 people to just disappear into solid rock. I called it in. "Tom, I'm at the turnaround chamber. No sign of them, but I'm getting beacon signals from impossible locations. Send down the full rescue team." The response was full of static. "John, can't clearly. Say again?" I tried the radio again. Dead silence. The lights around me flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In 18 years underground, I'd never been afraid of the dark. Cave darkness is different from surface darkness. It's complete, total, like being blind. But you get used to it. You learn to trust your other senses. This was different. This darkness felt alive. I clicked on my helmet light and swept it around the chamber. Everything looked normal. The same limestone walls, the same formations I'd seen 1,000 times. But something was wrong with the shadows. They seemed to move independently. Sly, ding along the walls like they had minds of their own. A sound echoed from deeper in the cave. It was a voice, a woman's voice, speaking in the clear, carrying tone that guides use when addressing tour groups. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll follow me this way, I'll show you something truly remarkable." The voice was coming from a passage that didn't exist. I knew this cave better than my own house, and there was no tunnel in that direction. Just solid limestone. But I could hear footsteps now, 12 sets of them, walking on stone floors that weren't there. I had two choices: go back to the surface and report that I was hearing things, or follow impossible sounds into passages that couldn't exist. I chose to follow. That's when things got really strange. The wall that should have been solid stone had a crack in it. Not a big opening, just wide enough for one person to squeeze through. I'd never seen it before, and I'd been in this chamber hundreds of times. I squeezed through the crack and found myself in a tunnel I didn't recognize. The walls were rough, natural limestone instead of the smooth, carved passages of the tourist route. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness ahead. My helmet light showed fresh footprints in the cave mud, 12 different sets of shoes heading deeper underground. The woman's voice echoed again, farther away now. "The cave you're walking through is over 400 million years old. Notice how the limestone formations." It was definitely Sarah's voice, but something was off about it. She sounded too formal, too old-fashioned. In all the years I'd known her, Sarah spoke like any other person from Kentucky. This voice had an accent I couldn't place, like someone from a history book. I followed the tunnel as it sloped downward. The footprints were clear in my light, and I could see where hands had touched the walls for balance. But the deeper I went, the stranger things became. The tunnel opened into a chamber that shouldn't exist. It was huge, bigger than any room I'd mapped in this section. Flowstone formations hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Pools of crystal clear water reflected my light back at me. It was beautiful. It was also impossible. I tried my radio again. Still, nothing but static. The emergency beacon signals were stronger now, coming from multiple directions around me. According to my equipment, the missing tour group was spread out through chambers that extended for miles in every direction. That's when I saw the first person. She was sitting by one of the pools, completely still, staring into the water. It was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who'd been part of the morning tour. I checked her ID myself when the group signed in. "Mrs. Patterson?" I called out. She didn't respond, didn't even blink. I walked over to her, and that's when I saw her eyes. They were wide open, but she wasn't seeing me. She was seeing something else entirely, something that made her face peaceful and terrified at the same time. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm Ranger Mackenzie. I'm here to help you." Her lips moved slightly. She whispered something I could barely hear. "Such beautiful chambers. We've been walking for hours. The lady knows so much about the cave's history." "What lady? Where are the others?" But Mrs. Patterson just kept staring into the water, lost in whatever vision held her. The woman's voice echoed again from a passage I hadn't noticed before. This chamber was sacred to the Cherokee people long before European settlers arrived. They held ceremonies here, believing the cave was a gateway between worlds. I left Mrs. Patterson by the pool, she seemed safe enough, and followed the voice. The new tunnel was carved with symbols I'd never seen before. Not Native American petroglyphs, which I knew from my archaeology training. These were different, older. The tunnel led to another impossible chamber, and another, and another. Each one more beautiful and more wrong than the lay. Saint. I found more members of the tour group scattered throughout the caves, all of them sitting peacefully, all of them staring at nothing, all of them whispering about the amazing tour they were on. But I couldn't find Sarah, the guide, and I couldn't find the source of that voice that kept leading deeper underground. In the fifth chamber, I found something that made my blood freeze. Scratched into the limestone wall, in fresh marks that couldn't have been there long, was a message. "John Mackenzie, you know these caves are mapped wrong. You know there's more down here than your bosses want people to find. Follow my voice, and I'll show you the truth." The message was signed with a symbol, a circle with lines radiating out like a star. No one knew I was down here except Tom and the emergency team. No one could have gotten down here ahead of me to carve that message, and no one should have known my name. The woman's voice called again, much closer now. "Ranger Mackenzie, you've been protecting these caves for 18 years, but you've never protected them from the right things." I spun around, shining my light in every direction. The voice seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Who are you?" I called out. "I'm someone who's been here much longer than 18 years. Someone who remembers when people showed proper respect for sacred places." A shadow moved across the chamber wall, not cast by anything in my light, but moving on its own. As I watched, it took the shape of a woman in an old-fashioned dress. "You want to find your missing tourists?" the shadow said. "Then stop thinking like a park ranger and start thinking like someone who understands that some places were never meant to be tourist attractions." The shadow woman gestured toward another passage I hadn't seen before. "Follow me, John. It's time you learned what's really down here." I knew I should go back. I knew I should report what I'd found and let someone else deal with whatever was happening. But 11 people were still missing, and this shadow woman seemed to know where they were. Followed her into the darkness, deeper than I'd ever gone before. The shadow led me through passages that defied everything I knew about cave systems. Tunnels that curved upward when they should go down. Chambers with ceilings so high my light couldn't reach them. Underground rivers that flowed against gravity. As we walked, the shadow woman talked. Her voice was clearer now, more solid. "My name is Kate," she said. "Kate Batts, though most folks around here called me other things. Witch was the polite word." I'd heard that name before. Kate Batts was part of the Bell Witch legend, stories from the 1800s about a woman who'd been accused of witchcraft and had supposedly haunted the Bell family in Tennessee. "You're supposed to be dead," I said. Her laugh echoed off the cave walls. Death's different when you've got unfinished business. And honey, I've got about 170 years of unfinished business. We entered a chamber unlike anything I'd ever seen. The walls were covered with paintings, not prehistoric cave art, but detailed murals showing the history of the cave system. I saw Native American ceremonies, early European explorers, Civil War soldiers hiding in the tunnels. And I saw something else. In every painting that showed the cave being used for tourism, people were missing. Tourists would enter in groups, but fewer would leave. You see it now? Kate asked. Her shadow was more solid here, almost like a real person. This has been going on for decades. The cave takes people, and the Park Service covers it up. That's not true, I said. I've been here 18 years. I would have known. Would you? How many accident reports have you filed? How many times have people gotten lost in sections of cave that are supposed to be perfectly safe? I thought about it. There had been incidents over the years, people who'd wandered off from tours and were found days later, confused and dehydrated. Tourists who'd claimed they'd been led through parts of the cave that didn't exist. I'd always assumed they were disoriented, suffering from mild hypothermia or panic. The cave's been trying to tell you something, Kate continued, but you've been too busy following Park Service rules to listen. She led me to the center of the chamber, where a pool of water reflected images that couldn't be there. I saw the missing tour group, all 12 of them, walking through chambers I'd never mapped. They looked peaceful, happy even, listening as Sarah gave them a tour that could last forever. Where are they really? I asked. Between, Kate said. Between the world you know and the world that's always been here. The cave is older than your government, older than your maps, older than your ideas about what's real and what's not. Why show me this? Because you're different from the others. In 18 years, you've never lost anyone permanently. You care about people, not just Park Service regulations. I watched the images in the water. The tour group looked happy, but they also looked lost, like they'd been walking for hours without getting anywhere. What do you want from me? Kate's shadow moved closer. Help me fix what's broken. This cave was sacred long before it became a tourist attraction. The Cherokee knew how to walk through it safely. They knew which chambers to avoid, which passages led to other worlds. Other worlds? Places where time moves differently, where people can wander for what feels like hours but never age, never get hungry, never find their way back. The water showed me more images. I saw parts of the cave system that weren't on any map, chambers that seemed to exist in several places at once. And I saw something else. My son Danny's 8th grade class trip scheduled for next week. Oh no, I whispered. Oh yes, Kate said. 28 kids, 2 teachers, and a guide who doesn't know the first thing about protecting children from places they shouldn't go. The images showed Danny and his classmates walking into one of the impossible chambers, following their guide deeper and deeper underground. Stop this, I said. I'll do whatever you want, but don't hurt those kids. I don't want to hurt anyone, Kate said. I want to save them, but I can't do it alone anymore. The cave's gotten stronger over the years, hungrier. It's not content taking 1 or 2 people anymore. It wants entire groups. What can I do? Kate's shadow solidified completely, becoming a woman in a long dress from another century. She looked tired, ancient, but her eyes burned with determination. Learn the real rules, she said, not the Park Service rules, the rules that keep people safe in places where the normal world breaks down. She reached out and touched my hand. Her fingers were cold but solid. The moment she touched me, I could see the cave as she saw it, not as a tourist attraction or a geological formation, but as a living thing with its own hunger, its own needs. I saw the places where reality was thin, where unwary visitors could step through into chambers that existed somewhere else entirely. And I saw the missing tour group trapped in a loop of chambers that led nowhere, following Sarah's voice as she gave the same tour over and over, unaware that they'd been walking in circles for hours in a place where time had stopped. How do I get them back? I asked. First, you have to accept that some of them might not want to come back. They're happy there. safe from all the troubles of the world above. But if you can find the real Sarah, not the echo the caves created, you can break the loop. Where is she? Kate pointed to a passage I hadn't noticed before. It was smaller than the others, barely wide enough for one person. In the heart of the cave, where it all began. But John, once you go in there, you'll see things that will change how you understand everything. Are you ready? Well, for that? I thought about Danny's class trip. I thought about the 11 people wandering in circles through impossible chambers. I thought about 18 years of unexplained incidents that maybe weren't accidents after all. I'm ready, I said. Kate smiled. The first time her expression had been anything but grim. Then let's go save your people. The passage Kate led me through was different from the others. The walls weren't limestone anymore, but something that looked almost organic. They pulsed gently, like the inside of something alive. My helmet light showed veins of crystal running through the rock, glowing with their own soft light. The cave's heart, Kate explained. This is where it all connects. All the chambers, all the passages, all the places where people get lost between worlds. As we walked, I could hear Sarah's voice more clearly. But it wasn't just one Sarah anymore. It was dozens of them, all giving tours to groups of people who'd gotten lost over the years. The voices layered over each other, creating a strange harmony that made my head spin. How long has this been happening? I asked. Since people first started treating the cave like entertainment instead of something sacred. Maybe 70, 80 years. Gets worse every decade. The passage opened into a chamber that hurt to look at. The walls curved in directions that shouldn't exist, and pools of water reflected lights that weren't there. In the center of it all stood Sarah Jenkins, the real Sarah, not the echo. She was standing perfectly still, her eyes closed, while multiple versions of her voice echoed through the chamber. Around her, tour groups from different time periods walked in endless circles. I recognized some of the missing people from this morning, but there were others too, people in clothing from decades past, all following their guides through tours that never ended. Sarah, I called out. She opened her eyes, and for a moment she looked right at me. John, how did you get here? I was giving the historic tour, and then we kept walking. We've been walking for hours, but we never reached the end. Because there is no end, Kate said, stepping into the chamber. Not unless someone breaks the pattern. The moment Kate appeared, all the tour groups stopped walking. All the echo voices went silent. Everyone in the chamber, tourists from this morning and tourists from years past, turned to look at us. Who are you? Sarah asked Kate. Someone who's been trying to fix this mess for a very long time. John, you need to choose now. You can take Sarah and try to lead everyone back to the surface, but some of them won't make it. The ones who've been here longest are too connected to the cave now, or what? Or you can help me teach the cave new rules. Rules that keep people safe without trapping them forever. I looked around the chamber at all the lost tourists. Some of them looked perfectly happy, like they were on the best vacation of their lives. Others looked confused, scared. A few looked like they'd been there so long they'd forgotten there was anything else besides endless cave tours. What kind of rules? Kate walked to the center of the chamber near the pools of impossible water. The Cherokee had ceremonies for walking safely through places like this, rituals that acknowledge the cave's power without getting trapped by it. If we can establish those protections again. You're talking about Native American religious practices, I said. I can't authorize that. The Park Service has rules about... The Park Service rules are what got us into this mess. Kate's voice echoed with sudden anger, and the chamber walls pulsed in response. Your precious regulations, your tourist schedules, your refusal to admit that some places are sacred, that's what's been feeding the cave's hunger. The tour group started walking again, but faster now, more frantically. I could hear the panic creeping into the echo voices as they realized something was wrong. Okay, I said quickly. What do you need me to do? Kate calmed down and the chamber settled. Accept that you don't know everything about this place. Accept that the map is wrong, that there are chambers and passages your supervisors don't want officially acknowledged. And most importantly, except that some places require respect instead of regulation. I thought about my career, my reputation, my pension. Then I thought about Danny's class trip next week. Tell me what to do. Kate smiled and began teaching me words in a language I didn't recognize. Cherokee, she said, though she'd learned it from the cave itself. As I repeated the words, the impossible chamber began to make sense. I could see how the passages connected, how the different time periods layered on top of each other, and I could see the way out. Sarah, I called out, I need you to stop giving the tour. Tell everyone to stop walking and listen to me instead. Sarah looked confused. But I have to finish the presentation. We haven't reached the end yet. There is no end until you stop trying to reach it. Trust me. Sarah took a deep breath and raised her voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief break from our scheduled tour. The moment she stopped talking, all the echo voices stopped too. The endless walking ceased. For the first time in who knows how long, the chamber was still. I spoke the words Kate had taught me. A recognition of the cave's power, a promise of respect, an agreement that some places were sacred and should be treated as such. The chamber responded. The walls stopped pulsing. The impossible angles settled into normal geometry, and paths that led back to the real cave system became visible. Now, Kate said, lead them home. But remember, this is just the beginning. If you want to keep people safe, you need to change how tours are conducted. Some areas need to be off limits. Some stories need to be told honestly. I nodded and began leading the confused tourists toward the passage that would take us back to, or the mapped cave system. Most of them followed easily, eager to return to the familiar world above ground. But a few lingered. An elderly man from what looked like the 1950s shook his head. I've been on this tour for years now. It's the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me. Sir, your family is probably worried sick about you. He laughed. My family's been dead for decades. Time works differently down here, son. I may have been wandering these chambers for years, but up there, I've been missing for less than a day. 3 tourists from different time periods chose to stay. They weren't trapped anymore. They could leave if they wanted to. They just didn't want to. Kate nodded approvingly. Some people belong in the spaces between worlds. As long as they're choosing it freely, that's not a problem. I led the others back through the passages, following routes that now made perfect sense. As we climbed toward the surface, Sarah walked beside me. John, what really happened down there? Something that's been happening for decades, I said. Something we need to make sure doesn't happen again. We emerged into daylight 6 hours after I'd first entered the cave. The emergency team had been preparing for a full-scale rescue operation. But here I was with 11 of the 12 missing tourists and Sarah, all of us alive and unharmed. Tom Bradley met us at the entrance. John, what the hell happened down there? Cave-in blocked the normal route, I said. Had to find an alternate path back to the surface. Mrs. Chen decided to stay below and continue exploring. She's an experienced caver, and she had proper equipment. It wasn't entirely a lie. Mrs. Chen was one of the 3 tourists who'd chosen to remain in Kate's chambers, and she had been an experienced caver in life. The fact that she'd been dead for 30 years was a detail Tom didn't need to know. For the next few weeks, I worked with Kate to establish new protocols. Not officially, I couldn't exactly put "consult with Cave Witch" in the Park Service manual, but I began subtly changing how tours were conducted. Certain areas were quietly marked off limits. Tour guides were instructed to stick to exact routes without deviation, and I started including brief acknowledgments of Native American history in the standard presentations. Nothing that would raise eyebrows, just recognition that the cave had been sacred to others long before it became a tourist attraction. Danny's class trip went perfectly. 28 kids and 2 teachers had a normal, safe tour of the historic route. They saw beautiful limestone formations, learned about cave ecology, and everyone went home with good memories and homework assignments. But I saw Kate watching from the shadows as the kids explored, a guardian presence, making sure nothing went wrong. The incident stopped. No more tourists wandering off into impossible chambers. No more confusion about passages that weren't on the maps. The cave still held its mysteries, but it no longer hungered for unwary visitors. I never told anyone about Kate or the chambers that existed between worlds, but I kept the words she'd taught me, the Cherokee recognition of sacred space. And every morning before the first tour group arrived, I spoke them quietly into the cave entrance. Some places demand respect instead of regulation. Some mysteries protect rather than threaten. And sometimes the things we call supernatural are just older ways of understanding the world, ways we forgot when we decided we knew everything. I retired from the Park Service 5 years later, but I still visit Mammoth Cave regularly. I take the public tours like any other tourist, listening to guides explain the geology and history of the chambers. And sometimes, when the tour groups are walking through the deepest mapped chambers, I catch glimpses of other passages in the shadows. Places that don't exist on any official map, but are still there for those who knows. Tell you how to look. Kate's still down there too, keeping watch, making sure the boundaries between worlds stay stable. We nod to each other when I visit, two old guardians who understand that some responsibilities last longer than careers. The cave hasn't lost any more tourists, but it still holds its secrets, still maintains its chambers between worlds where time moves differently and people can choose to stay if they truly want to. Some places are older than our understanding of them. Some stories are true in ways that can't be measured or regulated, and sometimes the best way to keep people safe is to remember that we're not the first ones to walk through these dark and sacred spaces. The cave remembers. Kate remembers. And now, so do I. My name is John Mackenzie, and for 18 years I thought I knew everything about Mammoth Cave. I was wrong, but that's okay. The most important thing I learned wasn't about geology or cave systems or Park Service procedures. I learned that some places choose their own guardians. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they choose you. My name is Rebecca O'Connor, but everyone calls me Becky. I've been a forest ranger for 15 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these West Virginia mountains could throw at me. Black bears, mountain lions, the occasional crazy camper, nothing I couldn't handle. That was before September of 1982, when I found something that made me question everything I knew about the natural world. I was working the Cranberry Wilderness area, about 60,000 acres of some of the wildest country left in the state. Most folks don't even know it exists, tucked away in the Monongahela National Forest like a secret. That's how I liked it. Just me, the trees, and the animals that belonged there. The morning everything changed started like any other. Coffee before dawn, check the weather radio, load up my truck with gear. I had my PhD in wildlife biology, 15 years of field work, and a reputation for being the most level-headed ranger in 3 counties. When people claimed they saw monsters in the woods, I was the one who explained it was just a bear walking on its back legs, or shadows playing tricks on tired eyes. I didn't believe in monsters. I believed in facts, evidence, and the scientific method. That morning, I was heading out to investigate reports of a dead black bear near Cranberry Glades. Probably got hit by lightning or died of old age. Simple, natural, explainable. The first thing that hit me when I found the bear was the smell. Not the usual death smell. This was different. Sharp, musky, like wet fur mixed with something I couldn't name. The bear was huge, maybe 400 pounds, and it was torn apart. Not by scavengers, not by another bear. Something had killed this animal with its bare hands. The claw marks were all wrong, too big, wrong angle, wrong depth. Bears don't kill other bears like this, not unless they're fighting over territory, and then it's quick, brutal, overfast. This looked like someone had taken their time, like they were angry. I'd studied predator behavior for 20 years, written papers on it, given talks at universities. I knew what cougar kills looked like, what coyote packs did to their prey, even what the rare wolf attack might leave behind. This wasn't any of those things. The bite marks were the worst part. Teeth had punctured the bear's skull, but the spacing was wrong for any animal I knew. Too wide for a cougar, too narrow for a bear. And there were thumbprints in the mud nearby. Actual thumbs with opposable digits that no known North American predator possessed. I spent 3 hours measuring, photographing, taking samples. Everything by the book. But my hands shook as I worked, and I kept looking over my shoulder at the tree line. Something was watching me. I could feel eyes on my back, but every time I turned around, there was nothing there. The forest was too quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, no insects buzzing. In 15 years, I'd never heard the woods this silent during daylight hours. It was like everything with sense enough to run had already left. That night, back at my cabin, I spread the photos across my kitchen table and tried to make sense of what I'd seen. Every logical explanation fell apart under examination. The evidence pointed to a predator that didn't exist in the scientific record, something big enough to kill a 400-pound bear, strong enough to crush its skull, and smart enough to use tools. I poured myself a whiskey and stared at the photos until my eyes burned. Outside, something howled in the distance. Not a wolf. We didn't have wolves in West Virginia. Not a coyote either. This was deeper, longer, almost like it was trying to form words. I locked my door that night for the first time in years. The next morning, I set up trail, cameras around the kill site. If something was hunting in my forest, I was going to get proof, scientific proof that could be measured, documented, and explained. For 3 days, nothing happened. The cameras caught deer, a few raccoons, one mangy coyote. Normal forest life. I started to think maybe I'd been wrong about the bear. Maybe lightning had struck it and scavengers had done the rest. Maybe I was losing my edge. Then I checked the cameras on the 4th day. The first camera showed nothing unusual until 3:17 a.m. Then something moved across the frame. Too fast, too big, walking upright like a man, but wrong somehow. The image was blurry, but I could make out broad shoulders, long arms, and a height that had to be over 8 feet. The second camera captured it from behind. Dark fur covered its entire body, and it moved through the underbrush without making a sound. When it turned slightly, I caught a glimpse of its face in profile. Human-like, but not human, with a heavy brow and jaw that jutted forward like an ape's. The third camera was destroyed. Not damaged by weather or knocked over by accident, destroyed. Torn from its tree and smashed against a boulder with enough force to scatter pieces 50 feet in every direction. I ran the footage over and over, frame by frame. The creature moved with purpose, intelligence. It knew the cameras were there. It had avoided 2 and eliminated the third. This wasn't some dumb animal acting on instinct. This thing was thinking, planning, learning. My hands shook as I picked up the phone to call my supervisor. Then I put it down. What was I going to say? That I'd found Bigfoot in the cranberry wilderness? They'd transfer me to a desk job or force me into early retirement. 15 years of credibility down the drain. Instead, I called Dr. James Whitfield at the State University. We'd worked together before on wildlife studies, and he was one of the few academics who wouldn't laugh me out of his office. "Jim, I need you to look at some footage for me," I said, "and I need you to come out here, today." "What kind of footage?" "The kind that's going to make us both question what we know about North American wildlife." He arrived that afternoon in his beat-up Honda, skeptical as always. Jim was in his 50s, gray-bearded, with the careful manner of a man who'd spent his career separating facts from wishful thinking. He specialized in animal behavior, had written books on primate intelligence. I showed him the videos on my laptop. He watched once, then again, then a third time without saying a word. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. "This is fake," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The timestamp says otherwise. The camera was locked to a tree 40 feet up. No way to doctor the footage without taking it down, and I checked it every day. Then it's a hoax. Someone in a costume." I showed him the measurements from the kill site, the photos of the bite marks and claw patterns. "Jim, look at the stride length. Look at the muscle definition in the shoulders. This thing weighs 6, maybe 700 pounds. No human could move like that in a costume that heavy." We spent the rest of the afternoon analyzing the footage. Jim had software that could measure proportions, estimate weight and height, even calculate the force needed to destroy the camera. Every analysis pointed to the same impossible conclusion. "If this is real," Jim said finally, "it's the greatest zoological discovery in a century. We're talking about an unknown primate species in North America, something that shouldn't exist, but obviously does." That night, we camped near the kill site. Jim brought recording equipment, more cameras, even infrared sensors. If the creature came back, we'd be ready. At 2:30 a.m., the infrared sensors went crazy. Something big was moving through the forest toward our camp. We could hear branches breaking, leaves rustling, but the footsteps were completely silent. No animal that size moves without sound unless it's trying to sneak up on something. Jim grabbed his camera while I reached for my rifle. The motion stopped about 50 yards away, just outside our light. "It's watching us," Jim whispered. Then we heard the voice. "Go away." Clear as day, in perfect English. "Go away from this place." Jim nearly dropped his camera. I fumbled with the safety on my rifle, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who's there?" I called out. Silence. Then from a different direction. "Death comes to those who stay. Go away." The voice was deep, gravelly, but unmistakably forming human words. Whatever was out there in the darkness was intelligent enough for speech, smart enough to flank us while we were distracted. We packed up and got out of there. Neither of us spoke during the drive back to town, but I could see Jim's hands shaking on the steering wheel. Everything we thought we knew about the natural world had just been turned upside down. The next few weeks blurred together as Jim and I tried to study the creature without getting ourselves killed. We called it the cranberry beast, though that name felt too simple for something so complex. We learned that it was territorial, protecting an area about 10 square miles around the original kill site. Hikers who wandered too close reported feeling watched, hearing voices in the woods, finding their campsites mysteriously destroyed. Hunting parties came back with stories of equipment going missing and strange sounds that made their dogs whimper and hide. But the creature wasn't randomly aggressive. It seemed to be protecting something specific. I spent hours in the local library, digging through historical records and Native American folklore. The Cherokee had lived in these mountains for centuries before European settlers arrived. Their stories spoke of a forest guardian that protected sacred burial grounds from desecration. The pieces started falling into place when I found a map from 1847 showing Cherokee grave sites throughout the Cranberry area. The creature's territory matched almost exactly with the locations of 3 ancient burial grounds. "It's not hunting," I told Jim one evening as we reviewed our findings. "It's guarding. Those burial sites are what it's protecting." We met with Thomas Crow Feather, an elderly Cherokee elder who still lived on the reservation 50 miles south. He was in his 80s with deep lines around his eyes and hands that shook when he poured tea. "My grandfather told stories," he said after I explained what we'd seen. "Said there was one left, the last guardian. Said he'd seen it once as a boy, tall as 2 men, strong enough to uproot trees. Said it grieved for its lost family." "Lost family?" "White man's diseases," Thomas said sadly. "Smallpox, influenza, things the forest people had no defense against. Killed them all except one. The stories say he's been alone for more than 100 years, guarding the graves of his kind." That night, Jim and I sat in my cabin, trying to process what we'd learned. We weren't dealing with just an unknown species. We were dealing with the last member of that species, a creature so alone it had been guarding the dead for over a century. "We have to make contact," Jim said. "Properly, I mean. With respect." 3 days later, we returned to the territory with no weapons, no aggressive equipment, just recording devices and a Cherokee blessing Thomas had taught us. We placed offerings at the edge of the burial ground: tobacco, cornmeal, a handmade blanket. The creature appeared at dusk. It stepped out from behind a massive oak tree like a shadow becoming solid. 10 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur, with amber eyes that held intelligence and sadness in equal measure. It moved with dignity, each step deliberate and careful. When it spoke, its voice was different than before, softer, less threatening. "You bring gifts," it said, looking at our offerings. "You know the sacred places." "We know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We understand what you're protecting." The creature, I couldn't think of it as a beast anymore, tilted its massive head and studied us. When it smiled, showing teeth designed for both plants and meat, I felt no fear, only sadness for something so alone. "I am Keeper," it said, "last keeper of the first people. You are not like the others who come with loud voices and bright lights." For the next hour, it told us its story. Not in words. Words weren't enough. It placed one massive hand on my forehead and another on Jim's, and suddenly we could see its memories like they were our own. We saw its family, a small tribe of forest dwellers who had lived in harmony with the Cherokee for generations. We saw the arrival of European diseases, watched as one by one the forest people sickened and died. We felt its grief as it buried its mate, its children, its entire species in the sacred grounds it now protected. We saw 150 years of solitude, of fighting off grave robbers and treasure hunters, of watching the forest shrink as humans carved roads and built towns. We saw its desperation as it realized it was truly alone, the last of something that should never have been allowed to disappear. When the visions ended, both Jim and I were crying. "The white men will come," Keeper said sadly. "They always come when the secret is revealed. They will want to cage me, study me, make me perform for their cameras. We won't tell them," I promised. Keeper smiled again, but it was the saddest expression I'd ever seen. "You have good hearts, but secrets like mine do not stay hidden. Already others are coming. I can smell their fear and greed on the wind." He was right. Within a week, reporters arrived in town asking questions about monster sightings in the national forest. Someone had leaked our research, probably a lab technician who processed our photos. The media circus had begun. Everything fell apart fast after that. News vans arrived first, then cryptid hunters with their cameras and night vision equipment. The quiet wilderness I'd protected for 15 years became a zoo of sensation seekers and fortune hunters. Keeper retreated deeper into the forest, but there was nowhere left to hide. Helicopters circled overhead, search parties trampled through the underbrush, and gun-happy locals organized hunting expeditions to bag themselves a monster. The breaking point came when a television crew from some paranormal show decided to set up base camp directly on top of one of the burial grounds. They brought generators, floodlights, and enough electronic equipment to power a small town. That night, Keeper's patience finally ran out. I was in my cabin when the screaming started. By the time I got to the TV crew's camp, 2 people were in the hospital and their equipment was scattered like confetti across 3 acres of forest. Keeper had uprooted a century-old pine tree and used it like a club to destroy everything electronic in the area. The message was clear: leave the sacred places alone. But instead of backing off, the media attention just got worse. The military got involved, claiming there was a dangerous animal loose in the national forest that needed to be captured or eliminated. I met with the commanding officer, a colonel named Harrison, who looked at me like I was some hysterical woman seeing things in the woods. "Ma'am, we have reports of an aggressive animal attacking civilians," he said. "We're bringing in tranquilizer equipment and a capture team. This thing will be contained." "Colonel, you don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't just an animal. It's intelligent, it's protecting sacred ground, and it's the last of its species." "Ma'am, I don't care if it's the last unicorn. It's dangerous, and it's my job to neutralize the threat." I had 72 hours before the military moved in with enough tranquilizer dough. Rugs to drop an elephant. 72 hours to find a solution that didn't end with Keeper in a cage or on a dissection table. That last night I went to see him one more time. I found him, sitting in a clearing near the largest burial ground, surrounded by stone markers his people had placed centuries ago. "They're coming tomorrow," I told him, "with drugs that will put you to sleep, then cages that will keep you locked up forever." Keeper nodded sadly. "I know. I can smell their fear sweat from miles away. There has to be another way. We could petition the government, get this area protected as a cultural site, maybe find you somewhere else to live. No. His voice was firm but gentle. I am keeper of this place. I have been keeper for 163 years. I will not abandon my family. Then we fight them off. With what? Your small rifle against their great guns? No, Becky O'Connor. There is only one way this ends with honor. He told me his plan, and I begged him to reconsider, but I could see in his amber eyes that his mind was made up. The last guardian of a dead people had carried his burden long enough. The military arrived at dawn with trucks, helicopters, and enough firepower to level a small building. They moved through the forest like an invading army, surrounding Keeper's territory with a net of soldiers and equipment. I was there when they found him. Standing in the center of the main burial ground, 10 feet tall and magnificent, waiting for them with the dignity of something that had never learned to bow. Colonel Harrison tried to negotiate first. "We're here to help you," he called through a bullhorn. "We just want to take you somewhere safe." Keeper's response was to pick up a boulder the size of a small car and throw it with enough force to crater the ground 20 feet from the nearest soldier. The message was clear: approach at your own risk. They shot him with tranquilizer darts first. 6 of them, enough to drop a charging rhino. Keeper plucked them out like thorns and kept walking toward the soldiers. "Lethal fee. Horse authorized," Harrison barked into his radio. The gunfire lasted maybe 30 seconds. When it was over, Keeper lay bleeding in the sacred ground he'd protected for over a century, his massive body covering 3 Cherokee graves. But he wasn't dead yet. As I ran to his side, ignoring the shouts from soldiers to stay back, Keeper reached up and touched my face with one gentle hand. "Remember," he whispered. "Remember for both our peoples." Then he shared his final gift, not just his memories this time, but the memories of his entire species. The history of the forest people, their language, their customs, their deep connection to the land. All of it flowed into my mind in a rush of images and emotions too vast to fully comprehend. When it was over, I was no longer just Becky O'Connor, forest ranger. I was the last keeper of knowledge that would die with me unless I found a way to preserve it. Keeper smiled one last time, closed his amber eyes, and let himself fade away. The moment he died, something changed in the forest. The air itself seemed to mourn. Birds that hadn't been seen in the area for weeks suddenly appeared in the treetops, singing a song that sounded like a funeral dirge. The wind picked up, rustling through leaves in patterns that almost sounded like words. And in the distance, for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw lights dancing in the sky, the spirits of the forest people coming to welcome their last guardian home. The official report listed Keeper's death as the elimination of a dangerous animal. The soldiers who died were attributed to a training accident. All evidence of Keeper's true nature was classified, locked away in government files that would never see daylight. I quit the Forest Service the next day. They offered me a promotion, a transfer to a desk job in Washington, even a commendation for my bravery under fire. I turned it all down. How could I continue working for people who would destroy something irreplaceable rather than try to understand it? The Cranberry Wilderness was never the same after that, without Keeper's presence to maintain the natural balance. Deer populations exploded, then crashed when winter came. Rare plants that had thrived under his protection began dying off. The sacred burial grounds, no longer guarded, were eventually developed into a recreational area with hiking trails and picnic tables. I moved to a small cabin outside town and spent my time writing. Not scientific papers or government reports. Those days were over. Instead, I wrote down everything Keeper had shared with me. The history of his people, their connection to the land, the way they had lived in harmony with nature for thousands of years. It's been 40 years now since that September in 1982. Jim died of a heart attack in 1995, taking his secrets with him. Thomas Crowfeather passed on in 2001, but not before teaching me more about the Cherokee connection to the forest people. I'm the only one left who knows the whole truth. Sometimes I wonder if I should have done things differently. Maybe I could have found a way to protect Keeper, to keep his existence secret until the world was ready to accept what he represented. But I know that's wishful thinking. Humans aren't good at leaving mysteries unsolved or sacred things untouched. The woods around Cranberry are quieter now, too quiet in the way that places get when something important has been removed from them. Hikers still report strange feelings in certain areas, shadows that move wrong, voices on the wind, but there's no intelligence behind it anymore, no guardian watching over the sacred places. Last month, a development company submitted plans to build a resort on what used to be Keeper's territory. Luxury cabins, a golf course, maybe even a shopping center. The proposal passed the initial review and will probably be approved within the year. They'll never know that they're building on the grave of a species that existed for thousands of years before humans learned to walk upright. They'll never understand that some mysteries should stay mysteries, that some secrets are too dangerous or too sacred to be revealed. I'm 81 years old now, and I know I don't have many years left. When I'm gone, the knowledge Keeper shared with me will die too. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe some things are meant to pass out of the world quietly, without fanfare or explanation. But on quiet nights, when the wind moves through the trees in just the right way, I still hear Keeper's voice carried on the air, still feel his presence in the shadows between the pines. The last guardian may be gone, but something of him remains, a sadness in the forest, a sense of loss that goes deeper than words. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see children in the woods who move a little too gracefully, whose eyes are a little too knowing. I wonder if Keeper wasn't quite as alone as he thought. I wonder if somewhere in these mountains, hidden in places even I haven't found, other forest people survived. I wonder, but I don't look. Some secrets are too precious to risk losing twice. The forest keeps its mysteries, and I keep mine. That's how it should be. That's how it has to be. My name is Marcus Whitmore, but everyone calls me Mac. I've been a park ranger here in the Great Smoky Mountains for 17 years now. That's long enough to see just about everything these mountains can throw at you. Lost hikers, bear encounters, flash floods, you name it. But I never believed the old stories. The Cherokee folks used to talk about hollow children, kids who died and came back all wrong. Mountain families would whisper about pale children who played in the forests, children with holes for eyes. I always figured it was just old mountain superstition, the kind of tales people tell around campfires. I should have listened. It started in October of 1969. The leaves were turning that perfect golden red you only see in the Smokies, and families were coming through Cades Cove by the dozens to see our historic cabins. That's my beat, the old homesteads from the 1800s. I know every board, every stone, every story about the families who used to live there. The first weird thing happened on a Tuesday morning. I was doing my regular rounds when I found the Henderson campsite. They'd checked out 3 days before, but their site looked like kids had been playing there all night. Toys scattered everywhere. Little wooden dolls, a ball, some blocks. But the Hendersons didn't have any kids. I checked the registry twice. I cleaned it up and didn't think much about it. Probably just some other family's kids wandering over. Happens all the time. Then the reports started coming in. Mrs. Patterson from Nashville called the visitor center, real upset. Her 8-year-old daughter Emma had been acting strange since their visit to the Elijah Oliver cabin. She keeps talking about her new friends, Mrs. Patterson said. But she was alone the whole time. She keeps drawing these pictures. I asked her to bring Emma in. When they showed up the next day, Emma was quiet, pale, wouldn't look me in the eye. But those drawings, they made my skin crawl. Pencil sketches of children, all pale and thin with dark circles where their eyes should be. "Who are these kids, Emma?" I asked, trying to keep my voice gentle. "The sad children," she whispered. "They live in the old house. They showed me games and told me about the hurt places." Her mother looked confused. "What hurt places, honey?" Emma just shrugged and kept drawing. That afternoon, I got 2 more calls. Similar stories. Kids acting different after visiting the historic cabins, talking about imaginary friends. drawing the same pale children with black holes for eyes. I'm a practical man. 17 years in these mountains, you learn to look for real explanations first. Maybe there was something in the old buildings making kids sick. Bad air, mold, something like that. I decided to check the security cameras we'd installed last year to keep an eye on the cabins after hours. What I saw made no sense at all. The cameras showed children playing in the Oliver cabin at midnight, clear as day, kids running around laughing, playing games. But the building had been locked up tight at 5 p.m., and I'd checked it myself. No way kids could get in there. I watched the footage 3 times. The children looked off, too pale, moving in ways that didn't seem quite right, like they were floating instead of running. And when one of them looked straight at the camera, I saw what Emma had drawn, just dark holes where the eyes should be. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning I called Janet Mills, another ranger who works the Cataloochee area. Janet's been here even longer than me, knows all the old stories. Janet, you ever heard anything about unusual activity around the historic sites? Kids seeing things, acting strange? There was a long pause on the other end. Mac, we need to talk in person. Janet met me at the Oliver cabin that afternoon. She's a tough woman, raised in these mountains, doesn't scare easy, but she looked worried. I've had 5 reports in the last month, she said. Kids visiting the old sites, then going home and changing. Parents say they're cold all the time, won't eat much, keep talking about friends nobody else can see. We walked through the cabin together. It was a simple 2-room log house from 1847, the kind mountain families lived in back then. During the day, with sunlight streaming through the windows, it seemed normal enough. But something felt wrong. The air was too still, too quiet. There's something else, Janet said. Old Tommy Sequoia, you know, the Cherokee elder who helps with our cultural programs, he pulled me aside last week, asked if we'd been having trouble with the lost ones. That's what his great-grandfather called them, children who died alone and couldn't find their way home. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. What did you tell him? I asked him what he knew. Mac, according to the old stories, there was a scarlet fever outbreak here in 1847. Killed a bunch of kids. Their families were so scared of the disease, they abandoned the sick children and fled to other parts of the mountains. We were standing in what used to be the main room of the Oliver cabin. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. Dropped. I could see my breath. Janet saw it too. Mac, she whispered, pointing at the wall. Scratched into the old wood, so faint I almost missed them, were names. Sarah, age 7, Billy, age 5, Mary, age 9. 23 names total, all with ages under 12. Those weren't there yesterday, I said. I'd walked through this cabin 100 times, I would have noticed. That's when we heard the singing. It was faint, like it was coming from far away, but I could make out the words. An old lullaby, the kind they might have sung to children back in the 1800s. The voices were high and sweet, but there was something sad about them, something that made my heart ache. Janet grabbed my arm. We need to leave, now. But as we turned to go, I saw her. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, standing in the doorway. She was pale, so pale she seemed to glow in the dim light. Her dress was old-fashioned, like something from the 1800s, and where her eyes should have been, there were just dark, empty holes. Don't go, she said, and her voice sounded like wind through dead leaves. We've been so lonely. The new children play such wonderful games. I blinked, and she was gone. Janet and I didn't talk much on the walk back to our trucks. What was there to say? We'd both seen her, both heard her speak. It was real, whatever it was. That night I couldn't get the little girl's words out of my head. The new children play such wonderful games. What did that mean? I found out the next morning when Billy Thompson's parents called the ranger station, panic in their voices. Billy was 7 years old, had visited the Oliver cabin with his family 2 days before. Now he wouldn't wake up. "He's breathing," his father said, "but it's like he's not really there. His skin is ice cold, and he won't respond to anything we do. The doctors can't figure out what's wrong." I drove to the hospital in Gatlinburg to see Billy myself. The kid was lying in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. His skin was white as snow, and when I touched his hand, it was like touching ice. "Billy?" I said softly. "Can you hear me?" His eyes moved to look at me, but it was like looking into a deep, dark well. Whatever made Billy who he was seemed to be gone. The doctor pulled me aside. "Strangest case I've ever seen," he said. "No fever, no infection, nothing physically wrong with him. But his body temperature is 10 degrees below normal, and it's like his mind just left." I knew then that this was just the beginning. Over the next week, 2 more children ended up in the hospital with the same symptoms. All had visited the historic cabins. All had drawn pictures of pale children with dark eyes. All were now lying in hospital beds, alive, but empty. I had to find out what was happening to these kids before it was too late. I started spending my nights at the Oliver cabin, trying to understand what was happening. I brought a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and Tommy Sequoia's phone number. If things got too weird, I figured the Cherokee elder might have some answers. The first few nights were quiet. Too quiet. No bird sounds, no rustle of small animals in the brush. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. On the 4th night, they came. I was dozing in my sleeping bag when I heard children laughing outside. I checked my watch, 2:17 a.m. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the cabin's old wooden porch. They were playing in the clearing in front of the cabin. 7 or 8 children, all dressed in old-fashioned clothes, all pale as moonlight. They were playing some kind of game, holding hands and dancing in a circle, singing that same sad lullaby I'd heard before. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt sorry for them. They looked so young, so lost. One of them, a boy who couldn't have been more than 6, broke away from the circle and walked toward me. Like the girl I'd seen before, he had empty holes where his eyes should be. "Are you the man who watches the old houses?" he asked. His voice was small and lonely. "Yes," I said. "I'm Mac. I take care of this place." "We used to live here," he said. "A long time ago. Mama and Papa left when we got sick. They said they'd come back for us, but they never did." My heart broke for him. Even if he wasn't really alive anymore, he was still just a little kid who'd been abandoned by his family. "I'm sorry," I said. "That must have been very scary." It was. We were so cold and so hungry, and nobody came to help us. We cried and cried, but nobody heard us. The other children had stopped playing and were watching us now. I could feel their sadnesses. It was like a weight in the air. "But now we have new friends," the boy continued, and something in his voice changed. "The warm children who visit the old houses, they share their warmth with us." That's when I understood. These weren't just ghosts haunting the cabins. They were taking something from the living children who visited. Taking their warmth, their life, their souls. "You have to stop," I said. "Those children have families who love them. You're hurting them." The boy tilted his head like he was confused. "But they're not warm anymore. They're like us now, cold and empty. Isn't that better? Now they understand how we feel." "No," I said firmly. "It's not better. You need to let them go." The other children moved closer, and I could feel the temperature dropping fast. My breath came out in white puffs, and frost started forming on the cabin windows. "We've been alone for so long," a little girl said. "We just want friends to play with, friends who will never leave us." That's when I realized how dangerous this situation really was. These weren't just sad ghost children. They were predators, feeding on the life force of living kids, turning them into hollow shells. I backed toward the cabin door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The children were surrounding me now, their empty eye sockets fixed on my face. "You're not warm enough," the boy said, sounding disappointed. "But maybe your daughter would be. She's young like us. She would make a good friend." My blood ran cold. Rebecca. They knew about Rebecca. "Stay away from her," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. The children laughed, and it was like ice cracking. "We've already visited her. She's dreaming of us right now." I had to get home, had to protect Rebecca. But the Hollow children weren't done with me yet. "Play with us first," they said in unison, their voices echoing strangely in the cold air. We know such wonderful games. The world around me started to change. The clearing faded away, and suddenly I was inside the cabin, but it wasn't empty anymore. There were adults there, a man and woman in 1800s clothing, cooking at a fireplace, talking quietly. Children were playing on the floor, but these children had eyes, had color in their cheeks. "It's supper time," the woman called, and the children ran to a wooden table that hadn't been there moments before. I was seeing the cabin as it used to be, back when the Oliver family lived there, back before the sickness came. But then the scene started to change. The children began coughing. Their faces grew pale and thin. The parents looked scared, whispering to each other by the fire. "We have to go," the father said. "If we stay, we'll all die." "But the children," the mother started. "They're already sick. There's nothing we can do for them now." I watched in horror as the parents packed their things and left, abandoning their sick children in the cabin. The kids cried and called for their mama and papa, but nobody came back. Days passed in the vision. The children grew weaker and paler. One by one, they stopped moving, stopped breathing, but they didn't disappear. They stayed in the cabin, cold and alone and angry. "Now you understand," the boy's voice whispered in my ear. The vision faded, and I was back in the cold, empty clearing. We didn't choose to be like this, but now that we are, we don't want to be alone anymore. "That's not an excuse," I said. "What happened to you was terrible, but you can't hurt innocent children because of it." "Can't we?" the girl asked, and she smiled, showing teeth that were sharp and white. "Watch us." They disappeared then, fading away like mist. I ran to my truck and drove home as fast as I could, praying I wasn't too late. Rebecca was in her room when I got home, tossing and turning in her sleep. She was 17, too old to be talking about imaginary friends, but as I watched her, she was whispering to someone. "Yes, I'll come play," she murmured. "I'll bring my friends from school too. We can all play together." I shook her awake. "Rebecca, wake up!" Her eyes opened, but they looked different. Distant, cold. "Hi, Daddy," she said, but her voice sounded flat, empty. I was having the most wonderful dream. There were children who wanted to be my friends. They live in the old cabin where you work. My heart sank. They'd already started taking her warmth, her life. I could see it in her eyes, that same hollow look Billy Thompson had. "Rebecca, listen to me very carefully," I said. "You can't go to them. They're not real children. They're dangerous." She frowned, and for a moment she looked like my normal daughter again. "But they're so sad, Daddy. They've been alone for so long, they just want friends." "I know, baby, but they're hurting people. They took 3 little kids and put them in the hospital." Rebecca's frown deepened. "The Hollow children told me those kids wanted to stay and play. They said it didn't hurt." The Hollow children. She knew their name. I called Tommy Sequoia, woke him up even though it was 3 in the morning. "Tommy, I need your help. The Hollow children, they're real, and they're taking kids." There was a long silence. Then, "How many?" 3 so far. Maybe 4, including my daughter. "Tommy, what do I do?" "Meet me at the old cemetery behind the Oliver cabin at dawn. Bring sage and cedar if you have any. And Mac, don't let your daughter out of your sight." The cemetery was hidden behind a thick stand of trees, so overgrown I'd never noticed it before. Tommy was waiting for me, carrying a leather bag full of herbs and other items I didn't recognize. "This is where they're buried," he said quietly. "The children who died in 1847. 23 graves, no markers. Their families were too scared to come back and bury them proper. The graves were just small depressions in the and covered with weeds and fallen leaves. But I could feel something here, a sadness so deep it made my chest ache. They can't rest, Tommy continued. Their spirits are trapped here because they died alone and afraid. Now they're trying to collect other children to keep them company. How do I stop them? Tommy looked at me with sad old eyes. Someone has to take their place. Someone has to stay with them so they're not alone anymore. You mean die? Not die exactly, but give up part of your life force, your warmth. Share what you have with them so they can find peace. I thought about Billy Thompson lying in that hospital bed, about my daughter's empty eyes, about all the other children who might be next. Will it save the kids they've already taken? Some of them, maybe. The ones who still have enough warmth left. The sun was starting to set, and I could feel them coming. The temperature dropped, and the hollow children began appearing among the graves. 23 of them, all pale and thin and sad. You came back, the little boy said, sounding pleased. We knew you would. You understand us now. I understand that you're lonely, I said. And I understand that what happened to you was wrong. But you have to stop taking the living children. We need them, a girl said. Without their warmth, we're so cold. Then take mine instead. The children looked at me with their empty eye sockets. You're too old. Your warmth isn't the right kind. It's all I have to offer. Tommy stepped forward and began chanting in Cherokee, burning sage and cedar. The smoke drifted over the graves, and for a moment the hollow children looked more solid, more real. He offers his life warmth freely, Tommy said in English, to ease your suffering and give you peace. The children moved closer to me. I could feel the cold radiating from them, but I didn't back away. If we take your warmth, the boy said, you'll become like us, cold and empty. But you'll let the other children go? They looked at each other, having some kind of silent conversation. Fina, Ellie, the girl nodded. The warm ones can go home, but you'll stay with us. Deal. They reached out their hands, and when they touched me, it was like ice water flowing through my veins. The world went gray and cold, and I felt something essential being pulled out of me. My memories, my warmth, my life. But as they took from me, something else happened. The hollow children began to change. Color came back to their cheeks. Their empty eye sockets filled with real eyes, brown and blue and green. They looked like normal children again, just very old and very tired. Thank you, the boy whispered, and his voice sounded human now. We can rest now. One by one, they began to fade away, not disappearing, but transforming into something lighter, something free. The last thing I saw was the girl smiling at me with real eyes full of gratitude. Then, everything went dark. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. Rebecca was sitting next to my bed, and she looked like herself again. Color in her cheeks, life in her eyes. Daddy, she said, grabbing my hand. You're awake. But something was different. Her hand felt warm against mine, but I couldn't really feel the warmth. It was like I was experiencing the world through thick glass. The doctors said I'd been found unconscious in the old cemetery, suffering from severe hypothermia and exhaustion. My hair had turned completely white overnight, and my body temperature was running 2 degrees below normal. Billy Thompson woke up the next day. So did the other 2 children. They were weak and confused, but they were alive and whole again. The doctors called it a miracle. I knew better. I tried to go back to work, but I couldn't handle being around visitors anymore. Something about being close to living people made me feel strange, hungry in a way I didn't want to understand. The Park Service moved me to an administrative job, filling reports and managing schedules. Rebecca recovered completely, but she never forgot her experience. She became interested in helping people, eventually becoming a counselor who works with the traumatized children. She says she can sense when kids are hiding something, when they're scared to talk about things adults might not believe. As for me, I developed what you might call a gift. I can see spirits now, ghosts and other things that most people can't. Families sometimes come to me when their children start talking about imaginary friends or acting strangely. I help them figure out if it's just normal kid stuff or something more dangerous. The hollow children are gone now, finally at rest. But there are other things in these mountains, other spirits and entities that feed on the living. The Cherokee knew about them, and now I do too. If you're ever visiting old places, historic sites, abandoned buildings, ancient forests, and your kids start talking about new friends nobody else can see, listen to them. Children sense things adults miss. They can tell when something isn't quite right, when something cold and hungry is watching them. Trust their instincts. It might save their lives. And if you're ever in the Great Smoky Mountains and you feel that sudden drop in temperature, hear children singing old lullabies, or see pale figures playing in the mist, don't stick around to investigate. Some things are better left alone. The mountains are full of thin places, spots where the past bleeds through into the present, places where the dead don't always stay buried, and the lonely don't always stay gone. I learned that the hard way. I hope you don't have to.